What is Labor Day and why do we celebrate it? Labor Day, the first Monday in September, is a creation of the labor movement and is dedicated to the social and economic achievements of American workers. It constitutes a yearly national tribute to the contributions workers have made to the strength, prosperity, and well-being of our country. Why is May 1st Labor Day? International Workers' Day, also known as Labor Day in some countries and often referred to as May Day, is a celebration of laborers and the working classes that is promoted by the international labor movement, which occurs every year on May Day, the 1st of May, an ancient European spring festival. Who started Labor Day? Observed on the first Monday in September, Labor Day pays tribute to the contributions and achievements of American workers. It was created by the labor movement in the late 19th century and became a federal holiday in 1894. Is Labor Day a national holiday? Labor Day in the United States is a public holiday celebration. It honors the American labor movement and the contributions that workers have made to the strength, prosperity, laws and well-being of the country. The holiday is also a federal holiday. What other countries celebrate Labor Day? May 1st is also a national holiday in the Russian Federation and Asian countries such as China, Thailand, and Vietnam. The Labor Day holiday, or Labor Day, is celebrated in the United States and countries such as Australia and Canada at different times of the year.
The fate of the galaxy rests on my shoulders, and my shoulders are stuck in a lift. Not exclusively. The rest of my body is still attached to my shoulders. I am Commander Reyes. And currently I am traveling in the lift from the bridge of my space-bound battleship, the Retribution, down to the hangar bay where I'm either going to board a troop transport to lead a ground assault, or jump into the cockpit of my fighter and heroically fly about in dogfights straight out of Battlestar Galactica. I am also nominally in control of the Retribution herself, since Earth's fleet of ships was mostly wiped out in an underhanded plot by Game of Thrones Kit Harington and his army of duplicitous space wildlings. Seems to mind that the senior ranking officer left alive keeps running off every few minutes to put himself in mortal danger. Saw the job's worths. It's my ship, I'll do what I like. But the lift sticks with me for two reasons. Firstly, you'll be spending a fair amount of time there. Return to the Retribution, into the lift. Pick a main story or side mission on the bridge, back into the lift. But it's also where I remember thinking for the first time, you know what? This game is actually quite good. Scratch that. Call of Duty, Infinite Warfare is really good. While it easily could have felt like Flash Gordon with reticles, COD. Savior of the universe. Infinite Warfare is just so. Not that. Its story campaign has the standard roster of faceless baddies to murder, but it's also got a heart. It's got characters and relationships with which I started out with a fair degree of cynicism. One of your comrades in arms, Ethan, is a wisecracking upgraded Borderlands claptrap with an assault rifle, but as the game progresses and the characters depart from their early, mandatory expositional dialogue, they fill out into proper human beings. Or murderous, front-kicking robots with human traits, in Ethan's case. Take Harrington's hysterically evil Admiral Koch. Koch leads the Settlement Defense Force, a twisted military dictatorship that sprung out of Earth's earlier galactic expeditions, originally assigned to oversee the ruling of far-flung colony planets. The SDF has since devolved into a kind of radical, militarist cult, bent on the conquering of Earth and its friendly off-world settlements. When we meet Koch in the first mission, his forces have captured you and two of the good guys on a nice world, after you've been sent in to figure out what might be, and obviously is, a nefarious SDF plot. As you gasp for breath in a failing spacesuit, Koch replaces your depleted oxygen tank with a new canister of life-saving air. Just long enough to ask how many of you there are, after which he does something we won't spoil, that is not just evil, but needlessly, willfully cruel. Kit Harington as Commander Koch. Koch could be a pantomime villain, but as the story progresses, it becomes clear he's actually an ideologue. While your Commander Reyes forms brotherly bonds with his team, particularly with his number 2, Lieutenant Nora Salter, and prototype robot super soldier Ethan, Koch's philosophy is one of ruthless order, retributive pain and precision violence. The lives of individuals are everything that Reyes and the crew of the Retribution are fighting for, laid out plain and barren missions and optional side missions, selected from the bridge. That see risking all to rescue hostages and stranded colonists from certain death. For Koch, individuals are expendable exclamation marks on the end of chilling political diatribes. It is testament to just how good the characterization in Infinite Warfare is that Koch can, as he does through a hacked camera feed midway through a later mission, demand that you and your squad surrender for immediate execution without sounding even slightly camp. The good thing, the right thing, for you to do is stop resisting and die. Koch is a frighteningly worthy sci-fi adversary. COD being COD, the mechanics in Infinite Warfare are like slipping on an old and familiar pair of anti-gravity boots. Shooting is as tight as ever, there are grenades to be cooked, a trick to which, even hundreds of years in the future, the bad guys are apparently yet to cotton on. But it's the innovations that hold the most charm. The most obvious addition are those aforementioned dogfights. From time to time, the story will force you into a futuristic space fighter, and the game briefly becomes a stripped-down elite, dangerous EVE, Valkyrie simulator. You barrel roll, whirl about in dogfights, and, best of all, frantically deploy flares to destroy incoming missile barrages as you fight to take down enemy battleships. There's nothing quite like the relief of seeing 8 hurtling torpedoes explode right in front of your cockpit. Unlike, say, Advanced Warfare's tank and helicopter battles, the space battles don't feel vestigial, but a core part of the game. The other 2 pillars of the Infinite Warfare triumvirate, multiplayer and zombies, have also been sharpened. Where some of the more recent CODs have pulled away from the modern warfare era of map design, large open battlegrounds with frenetic centers and space around the edges for the crafty sniper, Infinite Warfare, in both single-player and multiplayer, gives you more options for flanking the enemy. It's not quite as free with space as Modern Warfare's 1 or 2, but there's definitely room to crouch and skulk, in a way that made sniping in particular an impractical strategy in more recent melees of submachine guns, assault rifles and screaming 12-year-olds. The spacefaring dogfights feel like a core part of the campaign. That being said, several of the 14 multiplayer modes are clear recipes for meat grinding. Stalwarts like Kill Confirmed, in which points are scored by grabbing tags off fallen enemies, which, more often than not, requires you to take a jaunt into the enemy's crosshairs, and Domination, in which 3 map points must be captured, and a sort of shooty basketball in which a spherical drone must be kept away from the opposing team, actively pull you into close-quarter bullet exchanges. The addition of Titanfall-style wall running, boost jumping and a complementary focus on verticality, a marked step up from Advanced Warfare's clunkier movement system, only makes things more brilliantly chaotic. Zombies has been similarly honed, and continues the tradition of getting annually weirder. The hook this time around is that 4 strangers have been brought to an old movie theater to star in the latest production from a Peter Cushing/Hammer horror-esque director, Willard Wyler. Once there, they are teleported to an 80s theme park, Spaceland, which has naturally become overrun with the dead. As per, you earn cash from raiding the shambling extras. Buy new guns and open new areas with said cash, and then watch up to 3 other co-op players all get suddenly and dispiritingly chomped before running desperately round and round in circles as the entire undead tide sweeps after you. You'll laugh. You'll jump. You activate disco ball traps that force zombies into flash mob dance routines before being carved into bits by laser beams. Zombies is a gem. When Infinite Warfare's first trailer went live, it was pilloried, more explosions, more raw sound bites, more bobbing about in zero gravity. Infinite Warfare has all that stuff, but it's also, in every aspect, a brilliantly solid, popcorn, sci-fi shooter with you behind the visor. This is, for our future space credits, the best Call of Duty package in years. Even after half a decade, Skyrim is an RPG with an unprecedented level of soul. It's in its atmosphere from its flat frosty tundra and river-veined forests to its tallest peak, the throat of the world. It's in its cities from the hilltop settlement of Whiterun in the nation's heartlands, to the walled white fortress of Windhelm to the northeast, and the rocky magnificence of Solitude to the west. And it's in its people from the bold pride of the Nords, to the subtle schemes of the Dunmer, that's dark elves to you and I, and the mystery of where the Dwemer, or dwarves, ever disappeared to. The special edition is a brighter, sharper version of the exemplary game many people will have played a lot before perhaps even for hundreds of hours on multiple playthroughs. Its skies may now be more vibrant, its forests livelier and its cities more detailed. But its soul remains just as rich as it was back in 2011. While the technical overhauls can't quite bring the special edition up to the high visual standards of more modern open-world fantasy games like The Witcher 3. It's a substantial improvement over the original. From the views as you gaze across a huge mountain valley, to the lakes that shimmer in the morning sun, Skyrim's occasionally blocky architecture and aging draw distance can't detract from what is still a beautiful game, even today. As an enormous sandbox, rife with opportunity for player-driven adventure and open-ended storytelling, Skyrim is near unparalleled. You will spend your time questing through its many caves, dungeons and castles for pursuit of treasure, fighting dragons, goblins and vampires in order to defend small homesteads and entire cities from ruin. You'll stumble across secrets, uncover heinous plots and altogether create your own individual stories, discovering more and more about Skyrim's different races, factions and cults. It's a significant time sink. It's entirely worthwhile, though. Even today, Skyrim's core obsession with freedom is utterly engrossing. Its various scripted sequences are showing their age, with creaking, stiff character models, stilted animations and a fair level of flat voice acting across its many thousands of lines of dialogue, but the moment-to-moment adventure is unlike nothing else out there. It starts, as every Elder Scrolls game does, with you in chains, heading towards your execution. You don't know what you did to get yourself into this sticky situation, but you'll quickly find out that death isn't on the menu for you today. Just as you stick your head onto the block, ready for it to be unceremoniously locked off, a dragon attacks the city you're being held in. You take this advantage to escape in the chaos, and venture out into the world to forge your own legend. From there the possibilities are almost literally endless. You could pursue your first main quest and discover the road to uncovering your destiny as the Dragonborn, a rare breed intrinsically linked to the army of dragons who have conveniently returned to Skyrim. Or you could wander off on your own path. Become a warrior and take up arms with the Companions Guild in Whiterun, study the arcane arts and become a mage, specializing in any of Skyrim's 5 main magical schools destruction, restoration, illusion, conjuration and alteration. You could become a thief, handy with a bow, capable of sneaking around in the shadows and doing the bidding of the Underground Thieves Guild in the far southeastern city of Riften. Then there's the Dark Brotherhood an infamous band of assassins who kill for contracts, and whose final aim is regicide. Become a merchant, traveling the world selling and buying wares, or picking plants and herbs to become a master alchemist. Or you could begin with Skyrim's downloadable content, all of which come included in the special edition. The first of the larger 2 packs has you taking up arms with a band of vampire hunters. The second is an adventure to an entirely new island off the continent, called Solstheim, which takes visual inspirations from 2004's The Elder Scrolls 3, Morrowind -- a favorite among long-time series nuts. Whatever you do, you'll find fun and excitement. Developer Bethesda made large leaps from 2006's The Elder Scrolls 6, Oblivion to Skyrim, and the latter is a much better crafted experience. Swing the sword and you'll become better in the art of one-handed combat. Shoot flames from your hands and you'll increase your destructive magic rank. It's a really intuitive system, one that avoids the annoying tendency of some role-playing games to give you less control over the shaping of your character. The special edition also adds MOD support for consoles -- community-created alterations to the game that can add new gear, new environmental details or even entirely new quest lines to pursue. How these mods will influence your game depends how you played the game originally, and what platform you're playing on now. PC players will be used to these, having had access since the game released, but it's still great to be able to MOD the game directly from the main menu. As for consoles, it's a mixed bag. Xbox One owners will be super pleased -- thanks to Bethesda's ongoing MOD support since the release of Fallout 4, you'll get access to over 200 mods at the time of writing. PS4 players aren't so fortunate, and will likely be disappointed by the paltry number choose from Sony's 1 GB limit on MOD files means that the mods themselves are limited to more cosmetic changes that don't nearly explore the vast potential that a community-driven bank of content provides. This unfortunate platform inconsistency doesn't hamper what is, overall, a great remaster of an absolutely wonderful game. The original game for well over 400 hours, revisiting Skyrim is still an absolute treat -- like Todd Howard said in our interview, it's somewhat like seeing an old friend after a long time apart. Skyrim is still Skyrim, warts and all, so don't expect to play a bugless, glitch-free experience. But that values your time, rewards you in countless exciting ways, and understands the incredible art of building an utterly enthralling fantasy world. It's one of the greats. The slide and shoot in Titanfall. Beaut. Your sprinting, super-powered pilot drops to their knees, whisking along the ground and out of cover, training your shotgun towards a group of bewildered foes. Thud thud thud. Meaty roars from the gun echo as you pick off 1, 2, 3 bad guys. Dispatched before your skidding momentum is even checked. Then you are up and into a sprint again, running across walls and bridging gaps with the throaty cough of a double-jumping jetpack. There is some kind of expert wizardry that goes into the sheer feel of a first-person shooter language time. It could be a simple but effective marriage of thumb, audio and visual feedback, fizzing laser fire and disintegrating limbs. Whatever the method, Titanfall 2 feels terrific. An intoxicating blend of violence and momentum, Respawn's sequel has the kinetics of the thrill of Shinji Mikami's Vanquish while retaining the crunch and precision of Call of Duty, the military series many of Respawn's staff helped to create. We have been here before, of course. The first Titanfall was an excellent multiplayer-only shooter, introducing the delicious contrast of the nimble pilot infantry and the stomping power of their heavily armored, Titan, robots. As it turns out, that ebb and flow is suited just as well, if not better, to a solo campaign. Here you play Jack Cooper, a common or garden rifleman in a rebel militia battling the oppressive rule of the IMC. Cooper has only just begun pilot training, but finds himself thrust into the job and partnered with Titan BT-4247. The narrative is delivered with surprising wit and warmth as Cooper and the Optimus Prime-esque BT build their bond. It is good fun and doesn't take itself seriously, BT dropping deadpan one-liners as you go about your business. It is entertaining enough to make you care about Cooper and his Iron Giant pal, but brisk enough to keep out of the way of the action. And the action is extremely good, buoyed by forward momentum and the drip feed of new gadgets and weaponry. Titanfall's central contrasting strengths of pilot mobility and Titan power is more than enough to sustain a decent FPS campaign. That combat, that feel, never loses luster as you sweep over walls and around cover, rattling off fire and grenades, cloaking to reposition before using skidding in to kneecap a platoon of unsuspecting goons. Or when you board BT and engage in thunderous battles against other Titans, wielding shoulder-mounted rocket launchers, ruddy greatswords and incendiary fire-belching grenade launchers. The most impressive thing about Titanfall 2's campaign is that the combat isn't even the half of it. There is the sense that it doesn't have the eye-watering budget of Call of Duty or stable-made Battlefield. Its set pieces aren't as spectacular and, while the game is handsomely designed for the most part, some areas can feel a little generic. But the game's high points are anything but, utilizing the tremendous traversal and a sense of creative environmental design to break up the action with smart puzzle platforming sections. To go too far into mechanical detail about each would be to spoil the surprise. But there is a level of invention here that you rarely see in an FPS. Respawn take one-shot ideas involving traversal, Titans and combat and deliver them with real flair, discarding them before they outstay their welcome. In an interview with The Telegraph earlier this year, writer Mohammed Alavi claimed that you would do things in Titanfall 2's campaign that you won't have seen in other shooters. Turns out that wasn't just bluster. It is all over too quickly, however, with you wishing some of its concepts made a return in the denouement. There is something eminently laudable about this quick-fire invention that few developers outside of Nintendo have the confidence to attempt, but Respawn are perhaps just a little too quick about it to make Titanfall 2 a cast-iron classic. But it is ruddy close. Show more. The surprisingly excellent campaign is also a decent training ground for the mechanics and skills that will serve you in the multiplayer. The core ideas from the first game return, the parkour pilots, the Titans called in from the sky when powered up, the computer-controlled minions you can dispatch for extra points, but Titanfall 2 has seen a significant retooling in several areas of its competitive modes. The most significant of which is in the overhaul of Titan classes. The three variants from the first game, Strider, Atlas and Ogre, essentially light, medium and heavy, have been modified into 6 Titans with more specific loadouts and skills. Scorch is a heavyset pyromaniac, Dawn favors lock-on weaponry, Ion uses an energy rifle, Ronin wields a sword and a shotgun, Legion likes rockets, and North Star snipes. Each has its own shield or traps and super-powered core attack. Each of these classes are introduced in the campaign and bring variety to the multiplayer battlefield. Pilots also have more customization, from grappling hooks to cloaks, and an ever-growing arsenal that unlocks at a decent clip. The variety in approach means that this is a fast, lethal and highly skilled competitive game. Good players are able to whiz around maps with bewildering pace and accuracy, but what is nice about Titanfall is that its modes are set up to allow players with differing abilities to perform well from match to match. My one-on-one battling isn't so hot, usually leading to my repeated death. I am, however, relatively handy at scampering around the map at speed with my grappling hook. So on Capture the Flag. A classic mode given new life through parkour, I am a bit more of an asset than a burden, grabbing the objective, scampering across walls, through windows and doing my best to stay on the peripheries of combat and make it back to base. In Attrition or the excellent Bounty Hunt, you might prefer to focus on taking down the AI minions to rack up a score. You're not likely to top the leaderboards this way, but you will be having a lot of fun. That freedom does have its drawbacks, chief of which is that Titanfall isn't the most focused of multiplayer games. My suspicion is that players looking for a long-term challenge might find the multitude of distractions Titanfall offers takes away from the purity of straight-up gunfight. There are modes in Titanfall that offer this, of course, but it isn't where the game is at its best. Instead, Titanfall 2 shines when it is, as Alavi says, doing things that other shooters do not. Whether it is in the surprising invention of its campaign, or the busy ebb and flow of its multiplayer modes, this is a shooter that should not be overlooked. I don't think I quite realized exactly what I wanted from an FPS until I played Shadow Warrior 2. I was a fan of the original reboot. The action was frenetic, fun and suitably over the top, so I expected to be equally impressed with the sequel. Shadow Warrior 2 managed to blow all those expectations out the water. What was once a fun but linear traditional shooter is now a vast, expansive numbers game, equal parts FPS and RPG. There's a hub. There are side missions, and NPCs to accept them from. There is a massive amount of loot, power-ups and weapons. There's co-op. There's the same, irreverent humor that protagonist Larwang has become known for. And it's all wrapped up in a fantastic shooter with stats package. The story follows on from the first game, at the end of which the whole world went to hell. Now, demons and Yakuza inhabit a mashed-up mixture of human and demon realms. Seasoned hardman criminals roam amongst hideous fleshy monstrosities. Antagonist Orachizil owns a deliciously cyberpunk city, and the whole world's messed up. And it was mostly Larwang's fault. It's an interesting, vibrant take on post-apocalypse. Everything's just a bit weird, a bit off, and it's not entirely clear who is surviving and how. This serves to create this excellent fantasy playground for Larwang and his extensive arsenal as he trucks about completing missions, hacking up assassins and giant rats with equal relish. Wang's arsenal is comfortably one of the most impressive aspects of the game, too, and there is a roster of weapons here that puts most FTs to shame. Some of the weapons are similar in functionality, but every one of the numerous weapons are unique in appearance, and they range from swords and daggers to pistols, rocket launchers, assault rifles and even a few chainsaws. Then there's the power gauntlets. The various explosive weapons. A club with nails in it. Wolverine-style claws. The list goes on. You can have up to 8 of these weapons equipped at any one time, and are able to switch up the equip list whenever you want from the menu, and this alone provides a huge variety in the ways you approach combat encounters. I would perhaps have liked to have a second weapon wheel. There are just too many awesome weapons to restrict yourself to only 8, and it would have been nice to be able to have more of them on quick select. To make the weaponry even more expansive, though, Flying Wild Hog has created an excellent, free-form upgrade system. Throughout the game, Larwang finds hundreds of gems, all of which can be inserted into various weapons. These take the form of buffs, stat buffs, elemental upgrades, as well as standard. Weapons can be imbued with fire, ice, electricity and toxic stats. Some upgrades even allow you to change the form of a weapon. A turret gem will allow a chain gun to function as a turret emplacement, for example, or a piercing gem gives a weapon railgun-based functionality. Using the gems doesn't consume them either, so you're free to experiment and play around with weapon loadouts as much as you want. Simply switching a few gems can turn one of your favorite weapons into a whole new, fresh murder machine, and there's endless fun to be had if, like me, you're a fan of the numbers game, tweaking weapons to get the absolute most out of them in any given scenario or set piece. So, too, are there upgrades for Larwang himself? Upgrades that boost his various offensive or defensive chi powers, general damage stats, defense, etc. And there are a set of co-op exclusive gems, where playing in co-op will give you and your pals specific stat boosts that you don't get in the single-player mode. The missions never get more complicated than, go here, kill a lot of monsters, go there, but when the combat and traversal is this satisfying, that's perfect. Moving around the levels is a kinetic, thrilling affair, with Lo Wang's double jump and dodge allowing for some very frenetic exploration. Make no mistake, Shadow Warrior 2 is a fast game, and when you're overwhelmed by a shaman, 2 tumors, 10 crawlers, 4 yakuza and so on, being able to duck and weave between them all in a glorious ballet of bullets and blades is a godsend. In particular, the excellent melee combat makes Shadow Warrior 2 a tactile and immediate experience. A pitfall of a long FPS is that they can often wear out their welcome. Shadow Warrior 2 never does.
Relatively light if your daydreams or raids on the Union Depository. Quite heavy
If, for some reason, you want a lean and mean jaunt through the story, then many of the missions can be skipped, existing as side missions with subplots rather than mandatory for progress. But when they're this good, every side mission is worth doing, and I never moved on without having completed everything I could. Visit any area and free roam from the hub too, which makes grinding for loot and additional weapons an appealing prospect. One of my favorite aspects of the game is the champions. These are entirely optional mini-bosses who can be found lurking in almost every level, marked on the map by a large skull. There are unique boss characters who drop equally unique high-level loot, usually in the form of weapons. Heading off the beaten track and searching for these champions became a staple of every mission I played, and taking down the horrors is intensely satisfying. It's funny too. I'm not normally a fan of outright comedy/spoof narrative, preferring more natural comedy, and Shadow Warrior 2 walks that line well. Wang is the funny man, constantly irreverent, sarcastic and a bit deranged, while every other character around him takes the situation incredibly seriously indeed. I felt like Flying Wild Hog had channeled Deadpool for Wang, and succeeded in creating a character who's as interesting, deep and iconic as the Merc with a mouth. There are some really fun exchanges between Wang and Kamiko, the girl he's found stuck in his mind, and Wang's character, in particular, is so much deeper than he appears. With numerous side missions, free roam, new game plus and various difficulty modes, not to mention the co-op, there's a ton of replay value in the game, and so much more loot and unique weaponry to find than you'll come across on the first playthrough. It is a fantastic example of how to combine the numbers-driven loot game with the top-class FPS, and Lo Wang should be chainsawing his way into the annals of FPS history. Plus it also has music by Stanbush. What more could you want from a blood-soaked, irreverent, funny and frantic shooter?
No? Didn't like that one? You don't make it easy.
Outside a few standout moments in Battlefield, Bad Company and its sequel, the single-player portion of the Battlefield series has always been lacking. Chasing the success of Call of Duty's increasingly ridiculous blockbuster campaigns, Battlefield started gunning for those same set-piece-filled shooting galleries, its single-player portions mostly taking place in linear, albeit very shiny, corridors. This made single-player and its world-class, sandbox-style multiplayer feel like different games. In its campaigns, Battlefield forgot to be Battlefield. Luckily, Battlefield 1 has a better memory. In Battlefield 1, the single-player campaign is a collection of war stories spread out across the different theaters of the First World War. Rather than focus on a single soldier, we're given a handful of different perspectives, each with a theme. These are stories of heroism, where the characters perform incredible, and probably impossible, feats, yet, somehow, it still manages to feel respectful. It all opens with a battle in the sludge of France, as America's Harlem Hellfighters desperately attempt to hold a position against a tide of advancing Germans. You're thrown right in, the game mimicking the confusion of a sudden outbreak of violence. A message pops up to tell you that you're not expected to survive, as buildings topple around you, thick smoke fills the air, mustard gas coils in the wind, bullets ricochet off nearby walls and flames lick at you. You fire back, the the satisfying ping of a bolt-action rifle following each shot. You can hold them off for a short while, but eventually you'll succumb, joining the corpses that litter the charred battlefield. Then another message pops up, this time an obituary for your fallen soldier, their name and lifespan displayed on screen. Perspective shifts, and you're on the same battlefield further along the front, this time as another soldier. They all fall eventually. It's a harrowing start, and while the rest of the stories empower you much more than this opening, Battlefield 1 stays on message, little factoids and somber cutscenes hammering home the awfulness of the conflict. There is some levity, but it's well judged, never coming across crass. Not only is the tone right, but this anthology's style telling of personal stories allows developer DICE to take advantage of its multiplayer strengths. Take the first proper war story, called Through Mud and Blood, which tells the tale of a tank crew trapped behind enemy lines. Split into 4 chapters, it begins with you in Black Bess, a British MK-V tank, punching through the front line. The second chapter has you stalking through a misty forest on foot, using stealth to thin the enemy so you can escort Black Bess through. Next up, you're sneaking through a massive enemy encampment in search of spark plugs to get your tank moving again. Climbing windmills and sniping, slipping through like a ghost or engaging the camp in a firefight, you can approach it however you want. It all culminates in a massive tank battle as you try return to the alleys. Each self-contained story is like this, with surprising variety switching up the pace and keeping you engaged, while also quietly teaching you skills you will need when you jump online. The second war story casts you as an American con man who blags his way into a British plane, his story teaching you how to rule the online skies. The third sees you armor up as the Italian RDD Special Forces as they assault a fortified position. The fourth sees you storm Gallipoli Beach as an Australian Special Forces soldier, running messages between frontline positions while weaving between enemy patrols on horseback. And finally, the last story sees you play as a woman rebel allied with Lawrence of Arabia as they take down desert camps and an armored train. There are still linear sections, but most of the time you can approach battles however you want. The Middle East war story houses one of the campaign's highlights because of this focus on freedom. Funnily enough, it's reminiscent of Bad Company 2's best level, another that takes place in a desert, Sangre del Toro, which also took advantage of Battlefield's strengths. In Nothing Is Written, one chapter starts you on a hill on horseback overlooking an open plain. 3 objective markers pulsate on the mini-map. You're tasked with taking out the 3 base commanders and sending a fake message from their pigeon coops. From the dune, you glass the desert with your binoculars, scanning the night for enemies. Trucks patrol the open expanses, snipers sit in towers and grunts guard the camps. You can come at it from an angle you want. For me, the first commander was taken out by commandeering one of the base's tanks. The second was killed silently, with a knife. The third was sniped from a water tower. Next time, I'll do it differently, as I can definitely see myself playing through again. Battlefield's single player has never been better than this. One war story sees you as a rebel working with Lawrence of Arabia. As always, sound design is second to none, and the weapons all feel punchy and deadly, the environment crumbling under each shot fired, boards splinter, wood chips and bricks are blown out by explosions. It looks beautiful too. Now, though, these production values and that signature Battlefield polish are married to worthy level design. At one point I was spotted while picking off enemies with a silenced rifle from the top of a windmill and the enemy shelled my position, kicking up a blanket of dust as I fell to the floor below. The building crumbling around me. The campaign is full of exciting, unscripted moments like this, and that's why I'll replay it. It's the feeling that anything could happen that makes Battlefield's multiplayer great, so it's a relief to see it finally leveraged in a strong and varied campaign. Usually I would not recommend a Battlefield game on the strength of its single player, but Battlefield 1's war stories have toppled this tradition like a well-placed mortar to a windmill. Online, it's a game less focused on informing and educating on the atrocities of global war, instead concentrating on capturing the chaos and confusion of large-scale conflict, minus the horror. Here you tell your own stories in various crumbling, explosion-filled sandboxes, from the mountains and dunes of the Middle East, to the soggy bogs of a rural French town. Each of these brilliant maps are filled with interesting topography, natural choke points, fortified positions, buildings in which to seek cover, and multiple flanking opportunities. In these desolate towns, countrysides, deserts and coastal forts, there's a feeling that anything can happen, and that's what makes Battlefield a great series. Battlefield 1 continues that fine tradition, dropping players into huge war zones, allowing them to experiment and giving them freedom to create memorable, unscripted moments with their tools. In one unforgettable skirmish I'm holding a capture point alone, tucked inside the building, my mask keeping me safe from the enemy's mustard gas bombardment as I pepper anyone who enters. Another time, I help the team push the enemy back from a capture point with precision mortar strikes. During a different fight, I bypass the front line and pick a squad of enemies off from their flank with pinpoint sniper fire. There's so much you can be doing to make a difference in each battle, and, whatever you choose, it'll feel great. Bolt-action rifles are clunky and tactile, each shot followed by a satisfying ping. There is also a range of automatic weapons, clearly added as a concession to gameplay, which splutter out bullets with convincing heft, punishing extended fire with wild recoil. Pistols spit out bullets like a Dilophosaurus coughing venom into a Jurassic Park warden's face. Explosions dent the floor, crumble walls and shake your screen, leaving your ears with a deafening ring. Vehicles are menacing, tenacious and deadly. Get bored of one thing, and you can easily switch to another. It's a shooter that's packed with choices. Do you enter an enemy-filled building through the door, or do you destroy the door? How about you just climb in through the window? Should you throw an explosive in beforehand? Should you just bring the building down completely? Hell, why not spawn into battle on your team's massive Zeppelin, jump off and parachute to the roof, surprising them all? This level of choice also extends to your loadout, too, from weapon selection, gadget choice and even what class you want to be. Each has its strengths and weaknesses. Learning about the interactions between classes and soldier loadouts feels natural, as it's all very logical. Scouts are best at range, yet are easily flanked. Assault troopers are great at close range, and useful against vehicles. Support is the class for suppression, keeping the enemy's head down and clearing trenches, and the medic is essential for holding a contested point, keeping their rallies in the fight. Then there are special classes that you can get from item drops on the battlefield, giving you extra armor, a flamethrower, a huge machine gun and more, as well as vehicle-specific classes. It's this range, and the options available in the moment-to-moment gameplay, that make Battlefield 1 such a great military shooter. As I mentioned previously, it's chaotic, but you soon learn to read the game through all the noise. Mortars carve craters in the landscape, which you can then use as cover. Mustard gas curls through the air, prompting you to put on your gas mask. Tanks plow through buildings. Propeller planes dance through the clouds. A Zeppelin burns up in the sky, its metal skeleton crashing into the battlefield below, all as bullets ricochet around you and an enemy charges with their bayonet raised. This is a typical moment in Battlefield 1. Factor in a procedural weather system that can see rain, fog, sandstorms and more sweep in at any time, and the game becomes a violent cocktail of moments that feel unique to you. It's all married together by ear-ringing sound and a gorgeous visual design that really evokes the image of war. Embers glow in the debris of a shattered building, plumes of smoke rise from the dust, and mud is wet and sludgy from the stomp of thousands of mud-caked military boots. It's all extremely polished, too. The soldier animations even coping when you're desperately vaulting out of a partially destroyed building. The launch issues that plagued Battlefield 4 are nowhere to be seen, as yet. After bouncing off Battlefield Hardline, the series Cops, N, Robbers spin-off, and finding myself getting quickly bored of Battlefield 4, playing Battlefield 1 is like slipping on a pair of comfy slippers. Military slippers. It's easily the best the series has been since Battlefield 3. But stops just short of the greatness that was Bad Company 2. If you look at Battlefield as a series, it's been slowly stripping itself back since that heyday, and it feels like developer DICE is heading slightly in the wrong direction, in that regard. Bad Company 2 would have you spawn at your base, jump into a vehicle and fly or drive off. Here, you spawn directly into the vehicles, either mid-flight or ready to go. It feels arcadey and is a little jarring against a game that otherwise requires you to make some effort to understand it. It saps the immersion a little. It's not a huge criticism by any means, but it's a noticeable change, and one many Battlefield fans probably won't care for. While Battlefield 1 uses history as a backdrop, it doesn't seem to have learned everything it can from its own past. On the whole, though, Battlefield 1 is a fantastic game. If you want a shooter that replicates the epic scale of two armies at war, or one that prioritizes tactical thought over twitchy trigger fingers, this is the FPS for you. Civilization 6 is not just a great strategy game it's a remarkable comeback. After Civilization 5 got off to a slow start and the Civilization Beyond Earth spin-off experiment never hit its stride, this is a sequel with a lot of ground to cover. But it does more than just surpass all these lofty expectations from get-go. Civilization 6 compounds the numerous learnings and features of its forebears, while being familiar yet exciting, deep yet streamlined, and complex yet approachable in how it presents all of its uniquely inventive systems. Developer Firaxis makes great use of human history its achievements, flaws and in the case of the nukes, its self-destructive ambition. It also capitalizes on the intense charisma of some of history's greatest and most infamous leaders, injecting the game with buckets of personality, great voice acting, lavish detailing and uncanny animations bring its characters to life. Whether you're up against the pompous Philip II of Spain, the imposingly fierce Damiris of Scythia, or the philosophising Pericles of ancient Greece, Civilization 6 is a game that's charming and comical as well as historical. It's also beautiful. A significant restyle brings bolder colors and more cartoonish details, and it looks stunning in motion. The oceans lap gently against your shores and your fountains flow, the horse and carts on your farms plow the land, and your lighthouses rotate rhythmically to cast a warming glow on the coastal rocks. A night/day cycle gives life to your empire, and the return of the Wonder videos plants these historical marvels in your civilization like real landmarks incredible architectural achievements that will live on into the space age. The map is a living thing in itself, too, shifting and changing over the course of a single campaign, its crosshatch hand-drawn fog of war looking more like a magic painting than a strategic overview. The game's biggest mechanical change is the unstacking of cities. Rather than have all of your buildings indistinguishably occupy one physical hex crate on the map, which is a really odd way of looking at cities, when you think about it, Civilization 6 adds districts to spread your urban centers across a much larger landmass. These unique tile upgrades are separate to the farms and mines that still exist to provide your people with vital resources like wood and stone, but make expansion more creative while giving you a level of customization over cities. This is a fantastic shift. Not only does it hand you more control in laying out your civilization on the map, but it also has a far greater effect on the choices that you make upon every single turn. Each district and every wonder has different adjacency bonuses that change depending on the land that they're built on or near. Mountains give a huge boost to science. For example, and districts can't be moved once built, nor do the buildings housed within them ever change. The campus encompasses all of your science-based buildings, while the theater square is the cultural center for your city's culture output. All of these also have individual buildings that get created within those districts, too, so the bank will always be built within a commercial hub, while the armory will only ever exist in your militarized encampment. It leads to a constant decision-making process that influences how and where you build, and the procedurally generated geography of each campaign map means repeat sessions are always different, even if in only subtle ways. You might start a campaign to find you are surrounded by a science-boosting mountain range, or that you're without an ocean to exploit to travel the waves. It works both ways, but there's almost always something useful. A great example of this lack of foresight was my third campaign. Playing as the bold, brash and handlebar mouse-tatched Teddy Roosevelt in a particularly eventful run as America, I decided to occupy a sizable island and make it my own. Why not? I saw it as a great way of eliminating the barbarian threat, which in Civ 6 poses a far greater threat from get-go. But by the 150th turn I had established 4 cities on the island Washington, Cincinnati, New Orleans and Buffalo as well as Tromsø, which I had forcefully taken off the hands of Harald Hardrada of Norway. Each city had its own farms, mines and several different districts apiece. I was desperate for space in which to expand. But I couldn't. The result was playing a strategic game with myself, deciding which improvements to build over and which to sacrifice in order to retain a lead into the mid and late game stages. Victory conditions have also received a considerable shake-up in Civilization 6. Diplomacy is no longer its own victory condition, while religion is. The latter isn't nearly as dynamic as the other victories available to you. Domination, science and cultural, and instead can feel a bit spammy as you recruit any number of theological missionaries to spread the word into other civilizations, but it does add interesting interactions between each empire. There's also a massive change to way you advance through history. Previously, the technology tree plotted your path from the ancient eras through to the 21st century, but Civilization 6 splits advancement into 2 separate trees, extrapolating all of the cultural and political progression and plunking it into a new civics tree. This not only allows for more inventive cultural victories, it actively encourages adaptation, experimentation and adventurous decision-making. It even encompasses a collectible card game-style policy system, which determines the upgrades and boosts you can employ in your government a setup that expands and progresses as you move into new eras to unlock more card slots. Both trees are bolstered by the new Eureka system, which is perhaps the game's single greatest new idea. Every technology and civic upgrade now comes with a boost a single objective quest that, upon completion, will spark a Eureka moment that halves the research time. Sailing is researched in less time once you've discovered the ocean, for example, while some of the game's more militaristic research options are completed faster if you've killed a set number of enemy units. It actively rewards you for what you're doing in-game, creating purpose throughout every stage of your advancement. Despite so much more to think about in any given turn, Civilization 6 doesn't overburden you with its information. Its smart UI looks great while being effortlessly intuitive. Refinements to the way spies operate make espionage easier to grasp, while streamlining trading mean you don't have to fuss about creating roads because traders do it for you as they did with routes like the Silk Road. The same goes for building no longer do you have workers that take X number of turns to build a hex upgrade. Instead, Civilization 6 introduces builders, which have a finite amount of uses but which build a tile improvement instantaneously. It cuts the amount of waiting and lets you do more doing. Diplomacy has also received a huge shake-up. While the leader screens are packed full of more detail than ever rumors on your rallies and enemies, potential trade deals, options for war and relationship status. The moment-to-moment role of playing the diplomat is much better set up thanks to the game's agenda system. These agendas are identifiable character traits with two per leader. The first is a historical agenda, determined by a particular facet of that leader's personality from their time in rule. Philip of Spain hates religions other than his own. For example, while England's Queen Victoria dislikes civilizations that come from any continent that isn't her own. Barbarossa of Germany absolutely despises city-states, and he won't turn a blind eye if you decide to help them in any way. The second agenda is a randomized and hidden trait, which adds an air of unpredictability to every single campaign. This way, you'll never go into a campaign knowing quite what you're up against. Much like the game's map, the diplomatic status of any campaign will shift and evolve throughout the ages. It's a simple but clever system that allows for a tangible understanding of why a leader has acted how they have, while also guaranteeing extended longevity. That word improvement is applicable to almost everything in Civilization 6. From its various routes to victory and how those methods of play intertwine, to its leaders and the numerous interactions between those bold and colorful characters, this is a supremely strong strategy experience with only a handful of quirks and flaws. It launches in such a featureful state that it's a wonder where Firaxis could go next. It's always a breath of fresh air to find a game where you play as an OAP. Former cop Jack Lover is 70 years old and living out the end of his days in a care home. Still reeling from the tragedy that cost him his job and more 40 years previously. Quite against his will, he finds himself thrust into a scenario that forces him to rethink his situation and face his demons head-on. So the age of the protagonist set the story apart from me. There's no changing his immediate situation, that's all years in the past. This guy's spent 40 years of his life regretting the incident that plays out at the beginning of the game. The Last Time is very much a traditional adventure game in appearance and mechanics, with a gorgeously luffy aesthetic. But structurally, the game's far more akin to something the likes of Quantic Dream or Dontnod would put out, meaningful, game-changing decisions by the score. Something I particularly like was that, since it's set in the twilight of his life and we see very little of Jack before that point, you're able to shape what kind of man he is to a pretty interesting degree. The way he's spent his life, how he feels, even his sexual preference are up for shaping, and along with the strong writing, it really builds a strong attachment to the character in such a short, sweet game. The plot's exceptionally strong too, albeit with one rather jarring bit of progression that didn't feel hugely believable to me, mainly due to the game's brevity. It's enough to stop it being up there at the pinnacle of game storytelling, but only by a hair's breadth. Otherwise, the dialogue is believable, sensitive, thoughtful, the plot surprisingly gripping, and the potential deviations and outcomes are all equally satisfying. It's £2.79 on Steam, 2 to 3 hours long, and I absolutely highly recommend this little gem. Burly Men at Sea is the closest thing I've played to an interactive fairy tale. Developers Brain and Brain, who have a very interesting backstory, describe it as a quiet adventure game, and that's the perfect description. It's this gentle, slow-paced trip across the oceans, guiding the titular burly men as they seek action and adventure, aided only by a blank map they found in a bottle. And the sense of adventure is wonderful. The game's branching storylines are based on various Scandinavian mythologies, and it's the way these storylines branch, and the way you interact with them, that makes Burly Men at Sea extra special. Completing the game once will give you just one of a number of experiences. And the cyclical narrative and various divergences encourage you to go out and seek more adventures. It's a game you'll want to play multiple times, and no two playthroughs need to be the same. Each playthrough consists of 4 encounters. The first is always the same. The bearded adventurers encounter initial trouble. From there, you can perform a number of different interactions that set you off on a variety of paths, encountering everything from living mountains to mermaids to a hilariously maudlin Death himself. The writing is sublime, cheerful, sweet, very funny, and the method of interaction, mouse only, clicking and dragging and holding to solve minimal puzzles that divert the narrative, is accessible, relaxing and perfect for what it is. With some lovely audio touches where sound effects are created by human voice. To the drifting, melodic soundtrack, the lovely block color, simple visuals and a memorable, adorable set of storylines, Burly Men at Sea is a short, sweet adventure that I won't be forgetting in a hurry. The year of virtual reality they called it. 2016 would be when we all gave up the real world and disappeared into digitally created ones, at least for a little while, becoming a racing driver, zombie hunter, space pilot, even Batman. In concept, VR is nothing new. From science fiction to failed 90s attempts, the idea of slipping futuristic goggles over our head and immersing ourselves somewhere else has long been a technophile's dream. And now, here we are. Technology has caught up with our ideas, with 3 commercial headsets released. 2016 the year of VR. But perhaps not quite yet. While HTC's Vive and Facebook's Oculus Rift have both been released to critical appreciation, a combination of enormous price tags, stock shortages and complexity has led to flat sales, casting doubt over whether the mainstream is truly ready for VR. Or even wants it. Telegraph VR newbies try out HTC Vive 324. But now it is Sony's turn. PlayStation VR goes on sale next week and may well be the bellwether. It is perhaps the least technically advanced headset of the 3, but may well have the edge on cost, accessibility and comfort. These are the things that could drag VR from hobbyist to populist. PlayStation VR, what is it? PlayStation VR, or PSVR for short, is Sony's virtual reality headset for its PS4 console. It uses the PlayStation camera to track the Daft Punk-esque goggles, while you can use either the traditional controller or Sony's existing Move motion controllers as you move around the digital world. How much does it cost? PSVR will cost £349, camera and Move controllers not included, and is released on October 13, 2016. By comparison, the HTC Vive costs £759, which includes its motion controllers, and the Oculus Rift will set you back £550 without the as yet unreleased £130 Oculus Touch controllers. What is in the box and what else do I need? Opening the package, you will find the headset itself, a junction box that connects your headset to your PS4, and all the appropriate cables. You will also have PSVR titles to try, a spiffy PlayStation cleaning cloth. The box is the PlayStation camera that you needed for getting buyers up. Presumably the camera is not included in order to keep the price. More cynically, it is a boon for Sony to be able to say PSVR costs south of £350. Fortunately, many PS4 owners will own the camera, and they are not too expensive to buy new. The new V2 model costs £39.99, while you can shop around for an original version for much less. The newer model has a stand which makes it easier to position, but both work with the headset. You might want to get yourself a couple of Move controllers too. It's possible you have some lolling around from the PS3 days. They are the same controllers and will work on your new machine. Move controllers are not included, and most games support a traditional controller, but, as will become clear, to get the full effect of VR motion control is recommended. You can get a new pair of Move controllers for about £70, but it's also worth scouring eBay and the like if you are after VR extras on a budget. You also need a PlayStation 4 console, of course. Any machine in the PS4 family will work, whether it is the original model, the recently released Slim or the upcoming Pro. The Pro will apparently offer the best VR experience, but more on that later. This is where Sony has an edge. There are around 40 million PS4 consoles out there already, with the RRP set at £249 for the Slim for new adopters. Both HTC Vive and Oculus Rift need powerful PCs to run correctly, which typically cost upwards of £1,000. Setup. Much to my delight, PSVR is a genuine doddle to set up. The junction box plugs into the mains and connects to your PlayStation via HDMI and USB cables, and to your television via HDMI. This allows the TV to display what is on the headset, and means you don't ever have to switch cables whether you are playing PSVR or regular games on the TV. The headset then connects to the junction box via a cable and your earphones connect to a control widget on the wire which has your power switch and volume control. I nestled my junction box into a corner of my TV unit, and while it's not small, it is discreet enough to hide away. Switch everything on and the camera will display its feed on your TV and headset for you to calibrate your headset by moving into the correct box, recognizing your goggles by its blue lights. And that's it. You might have a small patch to download, but chances are your PS4 has already installed the relevant firmware to get PSVR working. The PS4 menu displays on the headset, and holding the start button recalibrates your view to the center. It is the quickest and cleanest VR setup I've had. A far cry from Vive's touchy half-hour. Though PSVR doesn't have the excellent room tracking feature that demands the effort of placing Vive's sensors and going through its laborious setup. But because everything is so easy and lightweight with PSVR, it is simple to switch between a sitting and standing setup by simply moving the camera around. The headset. The build quality on the headset itself is tremendous. While there is definitely no way to look cool wearing a VR headset, sorry about that, the PSVR's Daft Punk helmet look is a smarter proposition than Vive or Rift's hunk of black electronics. Crucially, it is incredibly lightweight when compared to the competition. The headband is easily adjustable and padded so that it slips over your noggin comfortably. The goggles, meanwhile, are surrounded by a thin rubber rather than heavy padding. It means that it rests rather than clamps against your face, making it a lot cooler and comfortable than the other devices. The trade-off is that it is more likely to leave gaps around your peripheral vision if not adjusted correctly, which can be a little distracting when playing VR. But the headband and visor are both adjustable enough that it shouldn't be a problem. I wore glasses while playing too, and while it is an unavoidable fact of all VR that playing without specs will be more comfortable, I found I had plenty of room in there. The display, meanwhile, is generally excellent. Each eyepiece seems a little smaller than the competition, with PSVR not surrounding you quite as completely as, say, Vive. The resolution, too, can be blurry for artifacts in the distance. This is where the trade-off on price comes in, with PSVR not being as technically proficient as its competition. It will be interesting to see what kind of boost the PS4 Pro will provide in terms of resolution. That said, most games still look terrific, particularly up close, with the headset able to render excellent 3D spaces rich in detail and color. And crucially, the refresh rate means movement and animation is smooth and comfortable, reducing the risk of nausea. As with any VR headset, there is always the danger of a little motion sickness. First-time users, in particular, might feel a bit woozy when removing the headset for the first time as you readjust to reality. From my own experiences, I found I could use PSVR motion sickness-free, though it is worth pointing out that I have used VR regularly before. It is inescapable that wearing a headset can be a strain, but every effort has been made with PSVR to make it as comfortable as possible. And while its display isn't as technologically advanced as the competition, it is the easiest to wear headset on the market. Playtime. There is no doubt that the video game development community is staunchly behind VR. It is an exciting and potentially innovative avenue for developers to explore. Support for PSVR is tremendous already, with apparently 100 developers working on games for the system. The launch games are a decent bunch too, from the high-paced multiplayer antics of Riggs, through the horror of Until Dawn, Rush of Blood and the brilliant wish fulfillment of Batman Arkham VR, probably my favorite VR experience yet. We will have a more detailed rundown of the PSVR's launch games next week, but I have been having a lot of fun with them so far. There is still a general feeling of experimentation, and it will take some time before VR games truly find their feet. Most are either short-lived experiential games, or arcade-style quick blasts. As people get used to VR, this is a sensible path to follow. Most importantly for the future of PSVR, all of the games are involving and technically sound. The head tracking is spot on as you move from side to side to look around. There is a brilliant moment in Batman Arkham VR when you are standing in front of the mirror as the Dark Knight himself. It is a thrill to see yourself in the cowl. But as you shuffle your head from side to side and Batman responds in kind, it shows off how accurate the tracking is. Given that PSVR is theoretically based on some older technology with the camera, latency could have been a sticking point. That it isn't is a superb technical achievement. Similarly, the Move controllers work well too. While the motion control isn't quite as sharp or involved as Vigilance or the Oculus Touch, latency is minimal and react to your movement as you would expect. Aiming a gun in Until Dawn or the London Heist, throwing batarangs or picking things up and pressing buttons in Job Simulator is all responsive and tactile. Some games are simply good fun being immersed in a virtual world while using a controller, but motion control can truly bring VR to life. Move always did of impressive motion control, and that it can finally fulfill its potential so many years after its launch is a surprising delight. Verdict. In many ways, PlayStation VR is a surprise success. Sony set out to build a headset that would appeal to the masses, and did it at the risk of providing an experience that doesn't match the competition. And while there are certain areas that PSVR doesn't match up to its more expensive virtual reality brethren, the differences are nowhere near what you might expect. And the trade-off is worth it, as PSVR also provides the most affordable, accessible and comfortable headset on the market. If there is a device that will take virtual reality into the mainstream, then PSVR is it. Price and release date. The PlayStation VR costs £349, camera and Move controllers not included. It is available to buy now from Argos, Tesco and Amazon. Paid content. Tiny device to be in 50 billion products by 2020. Banyan Hill Publishing. The most important map of America you will ever see. Banyan Mafia 3 protagonist Lincoln Clay is creeping his way through a lap dancing club, isolating gangsters and taking baseball bat swings at their heads with the butt of a shotgun. He's trying to get into the back of the business upstairs without scaring off the patrons. The club is a front, you see, and the back of house is actually a prostitution ring filled with black women who are held there against their will. It's grim business, but Lincoln soon has the women freed, leaving a trail of gangster corpses in his wake. All he has to do now is escape and report back to the person who tipped him off. Hopefully that will be enough to draw out the underbelly who owns this seedy racket. It is, so Lincoln gets in his car and speeds back to the exact same club, this time to shoot a man who's resistant to headshots, instead of rescuing women. 20 minutes have passed, all the bodies are gone. There's no sign of any disturbance and all the guards have reanimated. It's time for Lincoln to do it all again. Welcome to Mafia 3. Mafia 3 is a full game made up of repetitive missions set against a backdrop that promises much more. You drive between map icons, either to talk to a person to reveal new rackets to attack, or to attack a racket itself. It's the most uninspired mission design I've seen in a long time, and hardly any of it is optional. It's a huge shame, as the brilliant 4-hour opening teases the excellent game that could have been. The story begins with Lincoln Clay returning home from Vietnam during the late 1960 seconds. In New Bordeaux, the game's gorgeous fictional take on New Orleans, racial tension at this time is at boiling point, and black people are treated as second-class citizens. Mafia 3 doesn't shy away from the language used by the game's white folk either, shoving all its nastiness in your face and causing as much discomfort as Lincoln Clay's knife embedded in a gangster's eye socket. Its depiction of the period is easily one of its strongest elements. But it's never fully capitalized on. Playing as a black man is rare enough in video games as it is. But there's a real attempt to get players to empathize by placing them in the shoes of Lincoln here, forcing them to live through our recent, shameful history, and it's commendable. That's why it's such a shame that the game buries its story and its sublimely acted cutscenes, told through documentary-style footage and core testimonies, beneath so much forgettable filler. At its heart, Mafia 3 is a simple story of revenge, but its actors sell it to you with gusto, and the linear prologue does a great job of getting players invested. Unfortunately, as soon as you're out in the open world and you're free to roam, it becomes a repetitive slog. Not least because when you're doing the same thing on repeat, it only serves to highlight the limitations of the rest of the game. Take the shooting, it is solid and punchy, with each shot feeling deadly, heads pop in a violent crimson spray, accompanied by a gratifying pop, while enemies clutch for scenery as they keel over, wounds and fall to the ground with satisfying heft. Moving in and out of cover feels slick, too. Unfortunately, there's just not enough meat for solid shooting and the bare-bones stealth to carry the game. Because your options are limited, you soon start to notice flaws, like how stupid the AI is. They either sit behind cover sticking their head out slightly, or storm at you with a shotgun with no regard for their own safety. Some enemies will just not react to your presence at all, standing around and waiting to be killed. Others will rush a room one at a time, joining their friends for a cuddle on the floor as you take them down one by one. Shooting is solid and punchy, but mission design is repetitive. Stealth is the same. You either whistle enemies over and perform a violent melee attack head down from cover, or you crouch walk up behind them and do the same. You can move bodies, but there's really never any need to do so. There's also the option to perform non-lethal tack head-downs, but instead of having you hold a button or something similarly slick, you have to go into the pause menu and select it in the options screen. The driving, meanwhile, feels fantastic, even though you're only ever traveling to and from the next bag of house shootout with the same gangsters. Each turn feels angry. Every car feels weighty. Recovering at the last minute and accelerating into oncoming traffic like a speed demon. Tearing through New Bordeaux in Lincoln's beastly American muscle car is a joy, and, from the opulent French ward to the swampy, alligator-filled bayou, there are some gorgeous sights as you cruise around. A really great sense of place to New Bordeaux, further magnified when accompanied by Creedence Clearwater Revival, the Animals, the Rolling Stones, or anything else from the game's superb period soundtrack. For all of its issues, the setting of New Bordeaux is terrific. Again, though, there are still visible issues that scupper your enjoyment. Oncoming traffic pops into existence only yards from your car, making dangerous near misses feel more like luck than judgment. And again, the poor AI pulls you out of the experience, with people barely reacting to Lincoln mowing people down, or when the police see you speed into the side of another car and just drive on unaware. If you are seen committing a crime, a single civilian might run to a nearby phone box to call the police, giving you a chance to stop them. It's only ever one at a time, bizarrely, and most of the other people in the street won't react at all. It feels so artificial, and that makes the lovingly crafted New Bordeaux less magical. The water of New Bordeaux is also some of the worst I've seen in years. It's a flat surface that acts as an unmoving layer for Lincoln to swim through or boat across. NPCs can actually walk on it like it's a road, should you push them in. And that brings me on to another problem with this gangster epic: it lacks depth. Driving is muscular and satisfying, but unfortunately isn't made the most of. Mafia 3 is constantly reminding you how to do things via frequent, irritating pop-ups. 20 hours into the game, these pop-ups are still appearing, telling you how to bring down rackets, or how to pass off property to one of your 3 underbosses, doing its best to sell the illusion that there's more here than repeated shootouts in dull locations. The choice of which underboss to pass property off to is decided by what weapon upgrade you want, or what benefit you're looking to unlock. Sometimes you'll pass one to an underboss to keep them happy, but that's really all there is to the management side of things. The money you get from taking over rackets only exists to keep you topped up on guns for the next shootout or cars, so you can drive to the next shootout. Mafia 3 is a game with some brilliant ideas, but the execution falls flat. It's a huge shame, because the opening hours are full of promise, but it loses its way as soon as it embraces its open world design. Paid content. Send your student to college in style, shop Kohl's. Kohl's. 6 credit cards you should not ignore if you have good. Nerd wallet. The end? The reason Edward Norton is basically Worldation. NBA 2K18 Early Tip-Off Edition, PlayStation 4, PS4. Walmart. Olivia de Havilland is still fabulous at 101. ARP. This company was named GQ's favorite online shirt maker. GQ. Recommended by I hope their deaths are not in vain, says Lara Croft as she reflects on her companionship with a tribe in the Siberian foothills, a group drawn into her explosive chase for a mystical artifact known as the Divine Source. I can't have that on my conscience. Lara Croft's conscience, as it turns out, is rather frayed as it is. She has no problem wreaking violence in her obsessive pursuit, racing to the source against the malevolent military group Trinity. She will gun them down, set them aflame, jam arrows into the flesh of their necks. Lara is aggressive and viciously capable, her face twisting in rage as she cuts the throat of a man twice her size. "You bet I am," she snarls in reply to a Trinity soldier bellowing, "She's here," with no small sense of fear. This willingness speaks to a woman unhinged. At the start of the game, she sets on her hunt for the source, an object said to grant eternal life, in order to absolve her murdered father, smeared in the press as a lunatic for his own pursuit of the artifact. Daddy issues and a magical MacGuffin aren't the most subtle narrative devices, and the broad sweeps of the story are sub-Indiana Jones baloney, but Lara's misguided determination and refusal to listen to reason make for an interesting character piece. She's callous in combat, but clings desperately to the empathy that she started to lose grip of in the last game as she shot up half of Yamate. Lara is a capable, disarmingly confident commando. Rise of the Tomb Raider is far slicker and more balanced than the 2013 reboot. Lara's graduation from naive punchbag to confident adventurer opens up her skills as she traverses the ice of the Siberian mountains, sidling across cliff sides, using axes to climb sheer faces, firing arrows from her handcrafted bow to create rope swings. Abilities learned in the first game that are built upon here. Siberia itself is a beautiful, hostile and believable setting. Storms whirl, battering Lara as she crunches onward through sheet white snow. Abandoned Russian military outposts sit rusting between peaks. And further down, the snow melts away and forests sprout up, the trespassing setting up camps and huts between the trees. Despite every inch being meticulously designed with conveniently placed hooks and overhanging tree branches to aid Lara's clambering, there is a tremendous sense of place. The whistle of the wind and a cinematic flair to framing environments as huge expanses communicate a sense of isolation. One woman against the elements. And a tooled-up army, of course. Re's main thrust is the spectacular roller coaster ride that Uncharted popularized and the Tomb Raider reboot followed, frantic firefights and charges interspersed with more considered navigation. The rhythm is familiar, but developer Crystal Dynamics has learned to tone down the scripted excesses of the genre, blending its mechanics cleanly and adding variety. Straight-up gunplay is where the game is at its weakest, dumb enemies and loose aiming combining for a slightly scrappy feel. But there is a satisfying crunch and ferocity to it that means it is rarely less than entertaining. Crystal Dynamics know where the game's strengths lie, however, and the traditional shooting galleries, Lara behind cover, enemies popping up in the middle distance, are surprisingly infrequent. Combat instead often involves small packets of enemies that can be dealt with noisily or stealthy, Lara creeping through bushes and dragging hapless bad guys and fire an axe in their head. Bric-a-brac litters the floor, which Lara can pick up and cobble together extra equipment. Molotovs, nail bombs and even a primitive smoke grenade. Encounters then become a resourceful scuttle around the battlefield, and each approach seems as viable as the other. My favorite approach was a mixture of the two, lobbing Molotovs into pair of goons from a hidden position to send nearby enemies scrambling, Lara disappearing into the treetops like a cocky-wearing Batwoman, picking off befuddled bad guys one by one. Then again, sneaking through without any engagement at all is just as viable a tactic. Tomb Raider 20th Anniversary, Lara Croft through the years. View Gallery. Even if it is just a subtle tweak to a combat situation, a smart environmental puzzle or the addition of a new traversal skill, Rise makes sure you've always got something fresh to get your teeth into. The main adventure moves on at a fair clip, but is terrifically paced and has the rare quality of getting better as the game goes on, helped by a couple of open areas for you to explore and dabble in side missions. These breaks in linear action are wonderfully judged, allowing you to take a breath, find hidden treasure and help trespass people by hunting down some wild boar or disrupting Trinity communication towers. There's perhaps nothing here that you won't have seen in open-world games, but these alluring packets of freedom breaking out from a cinematic thrill ride is a clever change of pace. Rise of the Tomb Raider features a selection of puzzle-filled tombs, but they're not always where you would expect. The highlights of these are the several optional tombs, hidden caves stuffed with intricate environmental puzzles that I won't spoil here. This recalls classic Tomb Raider, one woman figuring out the secrets of an ancient civilization away from the Sturm und Drang of Lara's main campaign. The tombs are an absolute pleasure to work through, if a little simple, and have the added bonus of rewarding Lara with a genuinely useful new skill. If there's a complaint, it's that this obvious talent at puzzle craft is tucked away inside missions rather than permeating the main campaign. The puzzles that do crop up in Lara's quest are great, but one suspects the developer couldn't quite figure out a way of incorporating more of these tombs in the story without halting its rhythm. It's a tricky balancing act that has the effect of making the open sections feel like the game's high point. But the truth is that the smart trade-off between rollicking action and exploration makes for a cohesive, confident and satisfying adventure. Where Lara Croft goes from here will be fascinating, but rarely has a game's title been so apt. During the credits following Gears of War 4, campaign, new developer. The Coalition pays tribute to original creator Epic Games. You gave us a hell of a place to start. It is a more patent recognition of what the studio spent the previous 10 hours establishing. That Gears of War 4 is a game mindful of its blockbusting legacy, it is in safe hands, and it is ready to go again. It is in a breathless opening sequence that flashes back to events surrounding the original's Box 360 trilogy, reintroducing Gears' meaty cover-based gunfights as you battle alien locust forces as nameless COG grunts. It is in the gorgeous desolation and gothic architecture of Syrah, a planet in ruin after you brought an end to the locust threat last time round. And it in the nods and cameos, old friends returning, so yes, this is Gears of War alright. A ferocious, violent and noisy video game blockbuster about turning aliens into giblets with chainsaw-equipped machine guns that is smarter than it is often given credit for. The legacy is safe. But the Coalition brings its own flavor, reintroducing and refining in what feels like a soft reboot for the series. It is 25 years since the end of Gears of War 3 and the Locust War, finished by original hero Marcus Phoenix and pals in a wave of blue fire. Humanity won the war but has been all but wiped out, its cities destroyed and population decimated. The 10 best video games of 2016. 153. Gears of War 4 takes place in that aftermath, as a preening coalition of ordered governments, COG, tries to control its remaining citizens. Impassive military robots known as DBS patrol contained cobbled streets and hastily erected settlements. Posters in hospital wards queasily encourage reproduction for the good of the species, while a planet racked by war rebels, tearing down what's left with violent storms and wind flares. Into this evocative setup steps James, J.D., Phoenix, son of Marcus, and Kat, Gears 4's fresh and chisel-faced protagonists. J.D. has abandoned the COG with his pal Del and joined up with Kat's outsiders, a ragtag bunch that prefer to live outside the government's overbearing command. The COG is mental fond of this, of course, and soon you are blasting bits off of DBS as the game cranks into gear. The core gunplay remains a muscular and endlessly gratifying thrill. You slam a shoulder against cover, peering over to rattle off ordnance at robot flunkies. Corridors bulge into multi-layered bowls, dotted with elevated cover positions and flanking routes. In truth, the opening hour or so isn't the game at its best, the clunking DBS simply not as fun as their locust counterparts. In shotgun and rifle and familiarizing yourself with the rattle of an emptying clip and the satisfaction of a well-timed, power-boosting active reload. You can play co-op campaign online or off, with one player taking control of JD and the other is Kat. The game works just as well in solo play, however, with UAI comrades quick to revive you. Some nice new ideas and weaponry filter through the waves of straw hits. The shielded, floating guardians that can be brought down before pinching their Gatling gun, the rolling tracker mines that can be punted away like footballs, or the electromagnetic belch of the quick-fire overkill shotgun. If the opening is a little ponderous, and not, it should be noted, as satisfying in the robot blasting stakes as Sega's Gears aping binary domain, then what follows is sheer frenzy. A new alien threat known as the Swarm replaced the DBS as your antagonist of choice. From small, skittering, juvies that snap at your heels and are best dispatched with fire from the hip, to soldier-like drones, to bulbous pouncers that have a name that suits and tentacles that can rip your head off. They are not startlingly different to the locust hordes you are used to fighting, but the Coalition deploy them in such a way that fosters panic and escalation. Where fighting DBS is largely about hunkering down, the variety of swarm that come at you means you are constantly on the move, sliding from cover to cover and switching weaponry at a clip to deal with different threats. And the weaponry becomes as exotic as the best tree. Few video game weapons can match the pinging, violent gratification of a well-placed torque bow shot, while our favorite new addition being the drop shot, a modified mining tool that sends a grenade-mounted spike across the battlefield before drilling directly down. Ouch. All of this takes place in a spectacular setting. Gears of War 4 is an absurdly good-looking game. Grand, broke architecture crumbles beneath war and weather, while grotesque mutated Saxon tendrils stretch over the ruins as the swarm exert their control. There is a writhing feel to each of the locations the campaign drags you through, sometimes clankingly mechanical, sometimes revoltingly organic, but always rich in life, movement and detail. Occasionally this will lead to more than cosmetic effect too. Laid on, in the guts of a giant mining facility, cover spots will violently shift position. While one of the game's biggest new ideas, wind flares, will read the battlefield in ferocious gales, throwing grenades back in your face, ripping cover away and offering you the chance to squish oncoming swarm under flying debris. It is frenzied and terrific. Yet the Coalition often seem hesitant with new ideas, using them too sparingly before returning to the, still satisfying, core combat. You don't want a game padded with gimmicks, of course, but when Gears 4's campaign is a little fond of dropping in wave defense standoffs, you find yourself hankering for more of the inventive stuff. You get the feeling this is a deliberate gambit, keeping things simple but introducing flickers of ideas that will come into play for the inevitable sequel. Three-way battling between DBS, Swarm and your squad, for instance, appears only fleetingly towards the very end with excellent effect, before being dropped for a more thunderous but abrupt finale. Maybe next time. The campaign really picks up after the introduction of the Swarm, with varied enemies keeping you on your toes. As well as on and offline two-player co-op for the campaign, Gears of War 4 keeps up series tradition with a bulging online suite. Horde 3.0 is a significant update of the co-op wave defense mode that Gears of War 2 popularized nearly a decade ago. Horde will always be enormous fun with friends as you fend off platoons of bad guys, taking the game's combat theme of grid and survival to its logical extreme. But 3.0 introduces elements to freshen up the format and get you more invested. You haul around a fabricator, a machine introduced in the campaign that is something of a 3D printer for weaponry. You collect energy for the fabricator as you wipe out enemies, dropping it off before you can build yourself new weapons, turrets or other defensive tools. Meanwhile, a new class system doesn't have such an impact that it knocks the combat's balance off kilter, but offers different starting weapons and encourages concentrated roles and varied teams. Notably, Horde runs at 60 FPS over the campaign's more cinematic 30 FPS, and the competitive multiplayer also up for the faster pace. It is blisteringly quick and a lot of fun, but not without its flaws. The Nasher shotgun, which everyone packs as a starting weapon, is still bewilderingly overpowered to the extent a lot of matches are just close-range dances as players belt shotgun blasts at each other. Clever players can operate at the peripheries of this, but it still remains a balancing issue for a game that excels on flanking and maneuverability. The Buzzsaw is another effective new weapon, with pinging razor blades that bounce off walls. The amount of modes on offer, however, are excellent. All the traditional game types make an appearance, with area controlling King of the Hill and Guardian remaining favorites, but the new star of the show is Dodgeball. In this tremendous back and forth, each player only has one life, with the first team to wipe out their opponents declared the winner. The twist is that for every kill your team achieves, you also get to revive an eliminated teammate. It is terrific stuff, with rounds sometimes blowing out in less than a minute, or going the distance as teams trade kills. It is the ultimate comeback mode too, with the last man standing able to pick off one of a full opposing team to shift the balance. There are no lost causes here. Otherwise, this is the muscular Gears multiplayer a lot of players will find familiar, with busy maps dotted with cover, nooks and crannies, but given enough elevation to create sight lines for snipers and allow sneaky players to flank and flush out. It should be straightforward and enjoyable enough for newcomers to jump in, but old hands will feel like they are being reacquainted. And this is true of Gears of War 4 as a whole. Its thrilling, opulent campaign is tempered only by a lingering sense of familiarity and hesitation to capitalize on some interesting new ideas. While its online offerings feature all the bells and whistles you would expect of Gears of War, there is some work to be done for the Coalition to make Gears their own, then, but as the first page of new chapter for the series. It is a hell of a place to start. Price and release date. Gears of War 4 costs £49.99 and is available now. Paid content. Headlander. Platform Windows, PlayStation 4. Developed by Double Fine and published by Adult Swim, Headlander is a deliberately cheesy sci-fi B-movie Metroidvania platformer. I'm not normally a fan of self-aware mockery of B-movie styles. I think they work far better when played totally straight-laced, as the source material usually was. Headlander just about pulls this off. Occasionally it's slightly too aware of its wacky concept, in which you, a severed head, can attach to various robot bodies and computers in order to solve puzzles, upgrade, or shoot 7 shades of hell out of other robots. The self-deprecating humor can be a little flat, but mostly I found it simply wasn't there, instead reveling in the gloriously silly yet somehow sincere concept the game follows. And it's a very solid Metroidvania-style adventure. You can't jump, so it eschews the usual platforming challenges for puzzles and combat, and the differences between playing as a detached head and attaching to and controlling a robot really make for some fun, diverse scenarios. At times it lacks the punch that other Metroidvanias have. The upgrades mostly come in the form of possessing a better temporary body with better security access, so there's nothing hugely game-changing about the progression, but the concept is so fun and varied from the get-go that this hardly matters. Head and robot gameplay styles mesh together in a fluid, intuitive way, and the gorgeous colorful space stations and melodramatic sufficient soundtrack makes this sci-fi romp an enjoyable, surprisingly sincere tribute to the wobbly sets of old. Paid content. Leonardo and Kate finally confirms their relationship. Activist. Game of Thrones characters ordered from smallest to tallest is going to surprise you. OMG. Recommended by 4/5. Olivia White. ABSA. Platform Windows, PlayStation 4. ABSA might not be what you expect. I was assuming it would be an Everblue/Endless Ocean style open world exploration, but instead what I found was even better than that. The claims of Journey but Underwater aren't unfair. It's very reminiscent of that Gamma Company's spiritual adventure, albeit without the multiplayer, a fact that I think works really well in ABSA. Isolation and loneliness are a key part of the experience. You travel through various areas, exploring, looking at fish, finding hidden statues, shells and pools, and just generally marvel at the multitude of underwater life that you pass through. And it's wonderful. The story is beautifully told, without dialogue or cutscenes. The animation is sublime. And there's a real, genuine respect for aquatic life here. Without wanting to spoil anything, the way a certain plotline played out left me genuinely pleasantly surprised at how emotive and responsible it was. The underwater controls are sublime, the soundtrack by Austin Wintory is perfect, choral swells and orchestral build-ups, a real sense of place and spirituality. If exploring an underwater paradise and uncovering a fantastic story appeals to you, then give this stunning little gem a go. 5/5. OW. Mother Russia Bleeds. Formats Windows, Mac, Linux. I'm generally a big fan of anything that captures the 80s, video nasty, aesthetic. Early footage of Mother Russia Bleeds looked like it could be promising in that regard. A beat-em-up that didn't shy away from blood and gore. Extreme. Over the top. Silly violence. The game version of something you'd rent from Rob Fearon for 99p on a Friday night back in 1987. The thing with the best, and I use that word loosely, examples of the genre though was that the violence, while gratuitous, had a style to it. I'd hesitate to say it always had a point, but it had something that contributed to a vibe that you maybe won't fully appreciate unless you're over 32. Mother Russia Bleeds doesn't really have anything. It's disappointingly pedestrian, in fact. Sure, heads can explode and guts can fall out. But it's also, by the way, the only really aesthetically interesting level is the nightclub, and that's mostly because it cribs entirely from Irreversible. You even get a fire extinguisher at the start. It's just not exciting enough, not grimy enough, not low budget enough. It's like someone trying to ape 80 seconds video nasty without having ever watched anything from that era. As a beat 'em up, Mother Russia Bleeds doesn't fare much better. It's typical of the genre, the screen scrolling long, your characters pausing to beat up generic dudes, most of whom you eventually have to pound over and over and over until they finally fall. There is a set piece towards the end where you storm the Capitol, your characters trudging along ponderously slowly. The game tries to mix it up somewhat with injections you can take to power yourself up, and some kind of overwrought plot about socialism and evil experiments. For a game about punching men, it's surprisingly bloated with cutscenes. None of this does anything to set Mother Russia Bleeds apart from its similar, mostly better genre counterparts. Even the co-op, local only, fails to save the game from tedium. It's a shame. Aesthetically and mechanically there could have been something here, but there just weren't enough ideas put in play to make Mother Russia Bleeds into anything special. Coupled with the often frustrating collision detection and the woefully poor friendly AI, Mother Russia Bleeds ends up as little more than a tedious, forgettable drudge. 2/5 OW. FIFA 17 releases today, once again going head-to-head with Konami's Pro Evolution Soccer and gaming's biggest derby. Football games can be a real-time sync for their players, as they build their careers, online and off, over the course of 12 months. For many, there can only be one winner of their hard-earned cash and precious free time. But which one? For our part, it is a score draw as far as our reviews go, each game producing excellent 4-star performances for very different reasons. Paid content. 20 Things, Gunsmoke, producers hid from fans. Standard news. Paul tells all. What really happened on American Chopper, how did things take? Warlation. Recommended by. The familiar long and the short of it is this. PES 2017 plays a better game of football on the pitch but has issues off-field, while FIFA 17's boggling suite of modes and immaculate presentation make up for some flaws in the gameplay. It is easy, and not untrue, to say PES has it where it matters most, so that is the game to go for. But on the other side of the coin, it wouldn't be accurate to suggest that FIFA's bells and whistles are inconsequential to football fans looking for a year's worth of play. So much will come down to the type of player you are, what you are looking for and which game best suits your tastes. Here we try to pick out which football game is best for you. The purists. The footballing professors, students of the game, those that pore over stats and analysis and enjoy an innate understanding of what makes football matches tick. Those that believe gameplay trumps all, in other words. PES 2017 offers the best on-pitch action for our money, serving up matches that take on their own narrative and teams that feel like individual units rather than the same bunch with differing stats. Most things, passing especially, are sharper on PES pitch, with you able to adapt your game to both your team and your opponent as the AI brilliantly buzzes around the pitch. Understanding the game of football is just as important as being able to wield a controller. And each match, be it 4-3 thrillers or 0-0 wars, are a pleasure. PES 2017 wins on the pitch. That's not to say that FIFA 17 doesn't play a good game of football. In fact, the move to Frostbite has brought the most enjoyable FIFA in some time. It is fast-paced and fizzy, with a nice variety in goals and scorelines. Pace and power are nicely implemented, with a more dynamic physical game-making It is a good game, for sure, but just falls behind PES in a few key areas. Tactical variety remains an issue, where individual teams don't feel different enough from match to match. It isn't quite as responsive as PES, with some of the game still feeling a bit on rails as fancy animations unfold and your players delay reacting to your commands. And lastly, the AI isn't quite as smart, particularly in defense, with players standing off opponents too readily as they sweep the ball around the pitch. It is a closer run thing than some would have you believe, but for all of its excellence, FIFA just doesn't flow quite as well as its rival. Winner, PES 2017. The full kit fanatics. For some, football is more than just what goes on the pitch. It is buying shirts, following players on Twitter, obsessively devouring rumors on the latest transfer or stadium development. The whole shebang. FIFA 17 captures this side of the game far better, warts and all. Its extensive licensing means that most teams you can't think of are faithfully reproduced, kits accurate to a thread. A glut of stadiums, including every Premier League ground, are built in-game. Real-life managers are modeled as they prowl the touchline. The commentary flows and the crowd roars, singing recognizable chants at key moments in the games. It is also the best-looking football game out there, with the on-pitch action bright and sharp and the peripheries teeming with detail. Few games build such an atmosphere. This is a game where no expense is spared on looking the part. FIFA 17 looks and sounds the most authentic. This is where its rival stumbles. PES 2017 is a handsome enough game on the pitch, and many of its player faces are better than FIFA's, but elsewhere it simply can't compete. Licensing remains an unavoidable issue, with sporadic teams faithfully recreated, Barcelona the most notable and pervasive, but others a strange work of fiction. MD White anyone? That's Real Madrid. Man red and man blue tussle at the top of the English league. You can't go really blame Konami for this, though really guys, you could try a bit harder with your mock kits and names. You might as well complain that Crystal Palace haven't signed Lionel Messi, but it is still an issue. However, there is some excellent work being done in the editing community, with option files that give your game an air of authenticity easier to install, so it is a problem that can be partway solved. It does have the license to the Champions League, but when it is filled with teams like PM Black-White, Juventus, if you're wondering, the impact is rather diminished. Less excusable are things like the dreadful robotic commentary, clumsy menus and relatively staid atmosphere. These are things that Konami can, and should, work on improving. Kits can be edited, Jim Beglin's inane gibberish can only be switched off. Winner, FIFA 17. The Tinkerers. So you fancy yourself a tactical genius, eh? Employing the Gegen press or switching formation at halftime to turn a game around. That'll be PES 2017, then, with a tactical variety that is second to none. The player AI is smart enough to adhere to a game plan, dropping deep and close with a tiki-taka setup, or bursting forward on the counter-attack. Each plan feels different and can have a tangible effect on the match, particularly if you switch it up, finding gaps that perhaps were not there before. You must find players that fit a system, and don't be afraid to chuck on a big man at the death to get on the end of long balls, or bring on a fresh pair of legs to run at a tiring defense. And if you don't, the AI opposition will. Everything feels like it matters on PES. PES 2017 has greater tactical variety. FIFA 17 on the other hand, doesn't have quite the same variety. Different formations can influence a game, of course, while attacking mentality will see your players pouring forward or dropping back, and the added physicality gives you more options up front. But tinkering with the minutiae of tactics in the menus doesn't seem to have the tangible effect on the pitch that you might want. Most tellingly, the opponent AI is also reluctant to change or adapt in tight matches. Winner, PES 2017. The solo careerists. Many people like to play a football game in order to delve into a single-player dynasty, taking a club and building them up to a continental superpower. Both games give you the option with FIFA 17's Career Mode and PES 2017's Master League. And it's a tight-run thing. FIFA offers authenticity and depth, giving you the ability to take a League 2 side, for instance, and turn them into Premier League contenders. You are given a decent amount of control over your club, while scouting and transfers are well formed, while players will request transfers and ask for their chance in the team. Master League, meanwhile, is an often clumsy but always endearing adventure. The choice of teams is a lot slimmer, but it has plenty of character as you build your side. There is a nice focus on development, with burgeoning youth players in form making it hard for you to leave them out as their skills increase. And there is always that classic challenge of taking the Master League default team or unknowns and turning them into something great. FIFA probably has more to offer in terms of depth and longevity, but PES character and superiority on the pitch drags it level. Points shared. Score draw. The football biography fans. FIFA 17 upsets the natural order of things this year by introducing a surprise story mode called The Journey. You take control of 17-year-old starlet Alex Hunter as he begins his career in the Premier League. You train, impress the manager, make dialogue choices behind the scenes and control the youngster in matches. FIFA 17's The Journey is a surprising delight. Against the odds, The Journey is a delight, with a cliched but warm yarn that lets you peek behind the curtain of a Premier League club just a little. While The Journey never strays from U-rated wish fulfillment, there is enough going on here in terms of character, enthusiasm and plot to pull you through. The on-pitch action is a lot of fun too. Winner, FIFA 17. The Online Battler. Some players simply love the challenge of diving straight online and taking on opponents around the world. With PES 2017's superiority on the pitch, you would think this would be an easy win for Konami's game, but it is arguably its biggest stumble. Matchmaking can take too long, games are often laggy, and there is an overwhelming number of players that simply pick Barcelona and Real Madrid and try walloping balls up to prodigious front rows. And with no filter to avoid these constant matchups, it can get a little tiresome, win or lose. FIFA 17's seamless online option and filters lead to a greater variety in matches. Such things contribute to an online mode that can often bypass what makes PES so good. A bonus for beating a higher ranked team is a nice touch, and if you get a run of games against more like-minded players, there is nothing to beat it. But that often feels like a challenge. FIFA 17, meanwhile, is seamless in this regard. You'll often find games almost instantly, with a good connection more often than not. And with an option to search for players using teams with a similar star rating, you will be able to find a good variety of matches. Add in weekly cup competitions to go with season mode and you have a pretty compelling online offering. Winner, FIFA 17. The post-pub players. Getting a group of friends round for some 4-player action, be it preparation for a night out, A fine way to round off the evening, or, hell, taking the whole night itself, is often the best way to enjoy any game. Football ones in particular. Easily relatable to, and fiercely competitive, football game nights are a mainstay for me and many others. Both games are able to provide cracking local multiplayer, but PES 2017 will be the weapon of choice at my house. PES 2017 is a bit more unpredictable, making it the perfect local multiplayer game. Despite being the more technical game, or perhaps because of it, PES is also the most unpredictable and chaotic. Matches crackle with tension and hilarity, and the variety in its teams mean, providing you mix the teams up, few matches are the same. FIFA 17 is just a little more rigid in that regard, while better players can dominate games more. Either way, you can't go wrong with a few beers, a bunch of pals, and a tap of the random team button. Drinking games optional. Winner, PES 2017. The Card Hack Wheeler Dealers. Both games provide a form of fantasy football, with you able to start a team with lowly ranked players before buying random packs to boost your squad before taking them into matches online and off. While both are compelling, FIFA 17's Ultimate Team remains the original and best. It is a lot more slick and involving, and this year it receives a decent update. There will be them challenges that update throughout the season, while FUT Champions dishes out points for midweek wins that count towards entry in a weekend tournament. PES 2017's Mi Club has also been tweaked, with better menus and improved scouting that means you are more likely to get the type of player you need. But it is still clunky and limited compared to FIFA's slick behemoth. If card trading type games are your jam, there's only one choice. Winner, FIFA 17. So there we have it, a rundown of which football game is best for the wildly varied players it attracts. Football fans are fortunate to have two such excellent versions of the beautiful game, but which type of player are you? Let us know on Twitter at Telegraph Gaming. FIFA 17 and PES 2017 are out now for PS4, Xbox One and PC. If nothing else, this is certainly the most fascinating FIFA in years. Far from the usual annual tweaks and updates to its footballing formula. FIFA 17 arrives with two marquee upgrades, the switch to a brand new game engine and the addition of The Journey, a cinematic single-player mode following a prodigious young player as he vies to make his name in the Premier League. It is an addition that took many by surprise. A story in a football game? Pack. Yet The Journey is a surprising delight, flawed and cliched, but built with a sense of pride and warmth that is so often missing in such clinical sports sims. And, in this hyper-corporate vision of football we have these days, even the sport itself. And no, the irony of a video game that packs countless branded boots and makes a fortune selling player packs highlighting this is not lost on me. You play as Alex Hunter, a 17-year-old starlet just setting out on his football career. Taking him from academy exit trial survivor to his first Premier League contract, at a club of your choosing. It is the consummate rags to riches story, Alex coming from a broken home, overcoming adversity and setbacks with raw talent and hard work. While The Journey is careful not to stray too far from U-rated wish fulfillment, no shisha pipes or under-the-table deals here, there are some gentle messages about family, friendship and the pressures of fame that make it more than simply football matches with cutscenes slapped on top. When Alex gets the chance for his debut from the bench in a Forza Horizon 3 is what happens when a serious racing game lets the brakes off. Leamington's own Playground Games has had two excellent laps with its raucous, open-world driving sim, but not since Criterion's spectacular Burnout Paradise has a racer been so giddily carefree. The game starts you in the seat of a Lamborghini Centenario screaming through an Australian rainforest and only escalates from there. Within hours you will have thrown in a Royal Nomad buggy around the dunes of the outback, wrenched Imprezas around a jungle and launched BMWs off massive jumps, probably mulching a few trees and trash bins as you go. All the while being showered with credits, XP and backslapping adulation. Bloody great job, mate. Proper petrol heads might be a bit peeved at Horizon's laissez-faire approach to progression and simulation. The rest of us will be happy to go along for the ride. The framing narrative, such as it is, sees the Horizon Cars and Concerts Festival move down under, with you as its hip-stirring chief. Rather than just a participant, you are tasked with running and expanding the festival across the region. But don't panic. You are not about to be whacked with a raft of health and safety and planning permission minigames. Instead you get to customize each race you participate in, and your success directly ties into the festivals. Your scouts will find routes around the area, indicated by the liberal sprinkling of icons on the map, and when you pull up to each spot you can choose how many laps, which cars you want to race and what time of day it takes place. While the routes themselves remain the same, the choices give you a sense of individuality every time you pull up to an icon. If you don't fancy fiddling, you can take the default event which will represent the car you are already driving, or choose from someone else's variant online. This is a lovely touch as, if you are a bit attention deficit when it comes to racers like I am, you are always given the opportunity to switch vehicles race to race. While some areas of the diverse map are better for certain cars than others, Outback is fabulous for buggy and rally racing. The seaside city surfer's paradise favors sharp turns and road cars. Horizon's blueprints sum up the game's ethos of letting you do pretty much whatever you want. This extends to your driving style. Want to drive tight and sharp? Of course. Have some XP for some clean racing, they're copper. More clumsy and aggressive behind the wheel? Never mind. Great wreckage. Made, as you wallop rivals out of the way and go careening through fences. As long as you keep within the checkpoints, it's fair game. It is relentlessly excitable and upbeat, rarely content to settle, yet stops short of full arcade with that hefty, nuanced Forza Motorsport handling. Serious racers can switch off the multitude of assists and tune their car right down to tire pressure and differential. From 2-ton trucks to pootling hatchbacks, each type of vehicle and the road surfaces they ride on feel defined and responsive in their own way. Hauling a Shelby around a water-soaked bend is as different an experience as the pin-sharp turns of an Aventador on tarmac as you would expect. And this is how Horizon continues to thrill, channeling other famous racers in a breathless relay across its open world. The freewheeling joy of Outrun as you sweep a Ferrari F40 around seaside roads beneath an azure sky. The shuddering grit of dirt as you kick up dust in the outback. The starlit cool of yesteryear need for speed as you take part in midnight street races, while daft jumps address that burnout itch that has been unscratched for far too long. While Horizon perhaps doesn't match these games at their individual strengths, highlighted by opponent AI that can be erratic as you switch between styles and crashes that are a bit tame for my taste, that Playground bring them together as its own achievement. While the developer adds its own flavor with bucket list challenges that give you a spiffy car to tackle, a unique objective, and showcase events that have you racing against trains and helicopters and scripted Charleses around the map. And what a map! This is Playground's best playground by far. Horizon 2's Southern Europe was beautiful but lacked for variety. Not a bit of it here, with each distinct region a pleasure to explore. You can fast travel between festival locations, but it is distinctly discouraged with the fee for each teleport. With rivals to challenge, classic cars to find in barns and other trinkets to discover, it is stuffed with distraction. but it is also gorgeous enough to simply poodle around and enjoy the scenery. You could argue that Horizon doesn't go far enough, that it should leave its Forza heritage behind and become the pure arcade tear-up that it sometimes seems desperate to be. You could argue that it goes too far, that its carefree and chaotic approach to reward and distraction means it stops short of being the clever, combative racer that it could be. Neither quite gets to the heart of what Horizon is, a feast of driving that sets out to sate whatever vehicular desire you may have from minute to minute. It can't be perfect, perhaps, but it is a real pleasure. One of XCOM, Enemy Unknown's defining characteristics is how unforgiving it was. The invading alien force was technologically superior, genetically advanced, and it greatly outnumbered your cobbled-together XCOM force. As XCOM's commander, it was down to you to manage the squads, allocate resources, build your underground base, choose your research path, and decide which missions to undertake. A single bad move could see your entire operation begin to spiral out of control, culminating with funding being pulled and the XCOM project shutting down. These strategic challenges have never been more present than in XCOM 2, perhaps more so, with a constantly seesawing balance of power and time restraints that often force you into desperate action. This isn't a game where the heroes always win, it even assumes a canon, that you, XCOM's commander, failed to defend Earth in the last game. XCOM 2 is set 2 decades after the aliens quashed mankind. With Earth now under alien rule, holographic propaganda and reverent statues dot the sterile streets, and Advent, an alien-appointed security force, patrolled them, searching for members of the Resistance or any citizen who doesn't comply. Although human in appearance, it's clear from their garbled dialect, and even more clear once you have a corpse for the autopsy table, that their origins are sinister. The alien invasion story has been one of the biggest areas of improvement since Enemy Within. Its characters talk more, fleshing out a story and creating a sense of companionship despite the fact they're clearly just a cipher for each part of your mobile base's inner workings. There's more mystery here, and great cutscenes go a long way to layering on more and more intrigue as you discover bigger, more sinister revelations about the aliens' intentions. To say much more would be a disservice to the great surprises, but the game's narrative setup, an oppressive occupying force vs a struggling resistance, doesn't just allow for a greater storytelling, it makes for a much stronger marriage between story and gameplay. XCOM 2's core, its unparalleled turn-based combat scenarios, has undergone lots of little tweaks, which combine to make every turn feel precious and important. Even the base management feeds into the game's new setting, no longer brood underground like an Enemy Unknown. Your command center is a repurposed alien ship called the Avenger, constantly moving around the globe to avoid Advent detection. In order to build new facilities, you must excavate alien debris from compartments of the once derelict craft, much like the cross-sectioned and colony-style underground base of Enemy Within, but in XCOM 2 you have less room to expand due to the limitations of the craft. Your choices matter, from what research you tell your scientists to develop, to what facility you ask your engineers to build. It is this sense of agency that makes even micromanaging your base, or deciding where to send the Avenger next, truly exciting. The Avenger's bridge houses a huge, holographic globe. Selecting this zooms you right into a flat map of the world, another layer of the three-pronged strategy game. To progress, you do all your resource management, squad customization, facility building, and more, at the Avenger, before heading to the command center to decide where to send your aerial army. Do you zip across to a cache of supplies in the Arctic, time even passing during the journey, and spend 5 days gathering it up? Or do you head to Mexico and try to recruit that new engineer? Like with most things in XCOM 2, you can rarely do both, especially since there is an ever-present doomsday clock counting down to the failure of your entire campaign, forcing a restart. Whatever you decide to spend your limited time and resources doing, an alarm will eventually warn you of an assault opportunity, and then it's time to get your squad's boots on the ground. True to the game's guerrilla setup, most encounters begin with the enemy unaware of your presence as you infiltrate enemy ground. Concealment, as it's called, gives you the option to keep your troops hidden, sneaking unseen across the map until you decide you want to strike, or you accidentally stray into the enemy's line of sight and it all goes a bit Normandy landings. A well-thought-out ambush is often devastating to the enemy, providing you have managed to get each squad member into a good tactical position, hugging full or half cover and with full sight of the aliens. Putting soldiers on Overwatch allows them to react with fire when an enemy moves. It plays out with cinematic satisfaction. The camera swoops around the battlefield, focusing on each soldier as they fire, swinging up to a long view as the rooftop sniper lands a critical shot, panning down to the support soldier tucked behind the pillar as she peppers a fleeing enemy with bullets, wounding them, forcing them to flee right into the path of your shotgun-primed ranger. Boom. Once concealment is done and dusted, you can really start worrying about the safety of your squad. XCOM 2 is devilishly satisfying when a plan goes your way, but the game's great quality is how it is equally compelling when your plans begin to crumble. Enemies will take advantage of any mistake, an unguarded flank, units grouped too closely together, or a wounded straggler all draw the eye's attention. Even on normal difficulty, enemies rarely make mistakes, and they use each turn to strike with brutal efficiency. Most missions have a limited amount of turns in which to accomplish them, meaning a slow and careful advance is generally out of the question. It is a clever, cruel way of coaxing you into misjudgment, eking out risks when you should be patient. Sometimes you'll be forced to send a soldier sprinting into the fog of war just to get a grasp of the procedurally generated battlefields. But be that at your peril, they may end up toe-to-toe with an entire enemy squad and all out of moves. Often, if you are too slow at completing the objective, hacking a terminal, kidnapping a VIP, destroying a facility or a host of other objectives that pop up through the more varied campaign, you will run out of turns. Your soldiers will not make it to the evac points in time, instead becoming stranded on the battlefield and captured by alien forces. As with everything else in XCOM 2, its extraterrestrial foes are a much more varied bunch. Some genetically altered favorites return, but the game also introduces some disgusting new surprises like the Faceless, a rubbery, 7-foot mass of sentient glob that can change into a human form at will, only to charge at your flank when you engage another enemy. Even 30 hours in, I was still being surprised by the cool new enemies showing up in the field, each one as interesting, and as capable of changing the dynamics of the battlefield, as the last. XCOM 2's battles, and the decisions you make therein, have true weight to them, and these choices are made even heavier by XCOM's incredible level of customization. Before a mission begins, you watch your entire squad, all sat aboard the Sky Ranger before they rappel into battle, perhaps for the last time. With so much room to customize your own experience into a truly personal war story, from the color and style of the squad mate's armor, to the hair on their head, to a veteran soldier's scars of war, and even the little backstory you can create for each operative in their biz, creates scenarios that matter to you as a player. Each post-mission debrief is exactly the same as when going in, sat aboard the Sky Ranger, and if you've taken casualties. The surviving troops head back to base in silence, dismayed looks on their faces, the empty seats instilling the feeling of a profound loss in both them and you as their commander. There is even an entire wall on the adventure dedicated to these fallen heroes, letting you reminisce over their impressive combat record, letting you regret their cause of death. That grenade was only meant to blow an escape hole in the wall, Sergeant Hodgins. Honest. Every choice, every death and every shot feels like it counts in XCOM 2, and it is this feeling of real consequence that makes for a truly remarkable strategy game. one that goes beyond its clever design decisions and the odd technical hiccup to create a tangible sense, purpose, and real emotion to your squad's story. As an experience that puts you in control, lets you relish victories, forces you to truly mourn mistakes, and allows you to grow as a tactician against insurmountable odds, XCOM 2 is near faultless. With Rise of Iron, developer Bungie is moving Destiny-its 2014 MMO/FPS/RPG hybrid- into its third year. After 2015's The Taken King expansion refined the base game in a multitude of ways, improving it structurally and adding far more compelling reasons to return to play for days, weeks and months on end. There's now a similar level of expectation for Rise of Iron to build upon those foundations. It doesn't quite push the game forward in the same way, but there's still lots to like for returning fans. Rise of Iron's story expands Destiny's mysterious, often obtuse lore, introducing new characters and a new race of enemies for you to kill again and again. This time, the plot revolves around Siva-an outlawed nanotechnology that is apparently really dangerous. The Siva-infected group of fallen called Splitters, and the humans known as Iron Lords, a band of Knight-style resistance fighters who, before the collapse of humanity, defended it against a Siva outbreak. It's a cool insight into a universe we've always begging to see more of, and the fantasy meets sci-fi aesthetic is great. There is an all-new campaign story to play through. The 2-hour story starts and ends well, with the first mission being a tense build-up as you ascend a mountain peak in the snowy drifts of old Russia. Bungie has clearly learned how to script a brilliant sequence, and it's all on show in Rise of Iron's opening, but the missions in between can't quite sustain the high quality. There's a constant sense that you're just being flooded with a ton of enemies before you move on to the next firefight. And while Destiny has always been a bit about that, the padding is more prevalent here than it has been before. Overall, though, the campaign is just far too short - something which Destiny fans will likely be accustomed to by now - and its lack of any decent antagonist really lets it down. This doesn't ruin the core gameplay experience - its set pieces are good and its boss fights are tactically interesting, with some great melee combat opportunities - but it means that story just never has the time to mount properly. You end up - spoiler alert - defeating Siva, but with literally about half an hour between the story's big reveal and the final boss, the story feels a few missions, and a couple of narrative twists and turns, too short. Still, the level design and gunplay remain fantastic. You continually shift from large open expanses where you'll be popping off headshots from a distance with a hand cannon, mastering the varying terrain and finding higher ground wherever possible to get an advantage, to close indoor firefights where spatial awareness is absolutely key to survival. Bungie still knows how to make an incredibly satisfying, fluid shooter, and Rise of Iron is at its best when you're aiming down the sights. Of course, as with all of Destiny's content, much of Rise of Iron's most interesting sights and activities lay beyond the main story. After the main quests are done and dusted, there are 3 new strikes - one's a completely new strike called the Wretched Eye, and 2 are remixed versions of Devil's Lair and the Summoning Pits. The former is a great new addition to the already strong roster of 3-player missions for you to play and replay for better loot, but the latter 2 aren't much to write home about as you've essentially seen their main frameworks before. Then there's the new record book, which hands out smaller quests and missions for all kinds of rewards, giving more purpose to replaying missions on harder difficulties, or exploring more of the ambient world. Head to the Plaguelands and you'll find brand new patrol missions, as well as Archon's Forge, an awesome new arena mode that acts like one huge public event. The patrols themselves are good fun, especially with friends, but the Plaguelands are perhaps the most disappointing part of the Rise of Iron. After the Taken King took us all the way out to the rings of Saturn and the haunting Dreadnought capital ship, it feels a little short-sighted to offer us more of the same crumbling Soviet cosmodrome. Its snowy drifts look decent, but they're not as spectacular as you might expect from a series about exploring the solar system. At the time of writing, Rise of Iron's biggest new piece of content - the new 6-player raid, Wrath of the Machine - is yet to go live. Time will tell whether it lives up to the high bar set by Destiny's previous raids, Vault of Glass and King's Fall, which have both given players the best reason to chase the highest light levels and the best gear. For now, everything else that Rise of Iron includes is rather familiar. If you're just looking for a reason to get back into leveling up your Guardian and patrolling the crumbling remnants of Earth, this will absolutely sate your needs. For anyone looking for something more progressive, you might want to wait for the inevitable Destiny 2. Virginia, the first title from developer Variable State, has been on our radar for some time now. An excellent premise shown off in an evocative trailer, and a demo that was stronger than most. It's a gripping criminal investigation rendered gloriously colorful by an appealing low-detailed aesthetic. A brooding, stylized trip through small-town Americana. Presented in a way that eschews many traditional video game conventions and instead crafts itself as something remarkable. Not unheard of by any means, but handled with a style and grace so deft that it's easy to see how Virginia will be talked about for years to come. The best way to describe the game is as an interactive movie. It is incredibly cinematic. From the developer request to keep the frame rate locked to 30 FPS, which you can't bypass if you really must. But it adds a lot to the aesthetic, to the fantastic scene progression, to the movie-style jump cuts, fade-outs, perspective shifts. Everything is done in a way that simply wouldn't be possible in a movie, making full use of the interactive, player-controlled perspective. It's a sublime form of direction. You are making your way through this movie, able to explore the provided 3D spaces, taking in tiny details that you wouldn't be able to appreciate had developers Variable State decided to work in cinema instead. Unlike other games of its type, you're not simply walking from A to B, then B to C. You'll find yourself walking down a corridor, only for the scene to shift to another location entirely. A couple of the cuts aren't entirely seamless, but for the most part they're exquisite, a natural environmental and aesthetic flow that honestly I've never seen done like this in an interactive format before. Of course, Variable State can employ all the clever direction in the world, but the story they are telling has to match up. And Virginia's story is a thing of beauty, heavily inspired by the likes of Twin Peaks, The Twilight Zone, The X-Files, and more recently reminiscent of popular Netflix show Stranger Things. It is set in 1992 and using its era trappings brilliantly. The game follows the tale of an FBI agent, Ann Tarver, tasked with both investigating the disappearance of a teen in a small Virginia town, and looking into her assigned partner while she does so. The mystery takes her, and the player, on a tour of small-town suspicion and corruption, lies and deceit, guilt and redemption. It's hard to talk too much about the story when the game hinges so much on it. There's a lot to it. And much of the joy of a first-time play is discovering how that narrative evolves, how it changes from being a story of two FBI agents investigating a crime to a tale of personal discovery and soul-searching. There are heroes, villains, characters who inhabit a world of shades of grey, and a weird bison. The evolution of the relationship between Tarver and her partner Halperin showcases perhaps one of gaming's best, and most interesting, duos. The game crafts not only a gripping small-town crime thriller, but a truly human tale of interaction and friendship. And it does it without a single word of dialogue. This vastly bold decision could have been a drastic nail in the coffin for Virginia. Something that had to be handled absolutely perfectly, and it is. The developers have opted not to aim for graphical realism here. The characters are somewhat cartoony, a little like Campo Santo's excellent Firewatch with slightly less facial detail, but they manage to be incredibly expressive. The little looks and glances say as much as any dialogue could. You find yourself paying attention to body language, expression, tiny details left around the areas. Again, this is something that only an interactive medium could achieve, and you get the impression playing Virginia that developers Variable State are true scholars of the medium. Vision, every single piece of art direction and under, but at the phenomenally beautiful world I inhabited for those couple of hours, a world filled with wonder and mystery, populated by dozens of silent characters, all with a story to tell from a glance or a movement. And the way the developers utilize the structure they have built towards the end, as the denouement creeps up, deserves to go down in history not only as a remarkable moment in gaming, but a remarkable moment in cinematic direction in general. The soundtrack, too, is phenomenal, performed by the City of Prague Philharmonic Orchestra. For what is essentially a silent interactive movie, the soundtrack had to be absolutely on point, and the level of talent and beauty in the composition is stunning. It is niche, to some extent. And I think it's going to be slightly divisive. Some people simply don't want games to evolve in the way that Virginia pushes, which I personally think is a crying shame. But fair enough. It's not a game with leaderboards or peril or fail states or even puzzles, really. You could call it a walking simulator. Because certainly you walk around and click on things and the game progresses and that's pretty much it. But that would be incredibly reductive to describe what Virginia actually is. Which is something that takes this style of game and turns it into something new, something marvelous. Virginia hit me right in the chest, the kind of game I've wanted to exist for years, and the first game to actually nail it in a way that I think fully takes advantage of the potential. It is the game that titles like Dear Esther, Gone Home and Firewatch have hinted at, but in a way that evolves the interactive narrative form way beyond anything we've seen before. It's a game to savor and talk about for years to come, one that left me, just like the inhabitants of Kingdom, Virginia, speechless. By Olivia White. Just before the technological muscle flexing of Sony's 4K-enabled PlayStation 4 Pro, the company officially unveiled its redesigned, standard, PS4. A slimmer, cheaper version of the console that has thus far dominated this generation. With the PS4 Pro's 4K power jump coming in just a few months, the timing of the release of the PS4 Slim, as it has become colloquially known, is interesting, and a decent barometer for who the console is aimed at. At £259, the PS4 Slim is set to tempt the more casual gamer that is yet to buy into the latest console generation. Technophiles and PS4 veterans can comfortably wait for the Pro if they are 4K TV owners because, by and large, the Slim is packing the same technology as the original PS4 into a smaller frame. Not that there is anything wrong with that, of course. The PS4 is a tremendous games console and the tweaks to the Slim are generally for the better. The PS4 Slim is significantly smaller than the original model credit, Sony. Design. As well as being significantly smaller than the original PS4, the Slim has undergone some cosmetic changes to its chassis. Gone is the half-matte, half-gloss finish, and angular corners of the original machine, replaced by a curvy matte design. Its rounded edges and simplistic design don't look that revolutionary in pictures, but close up the PS4 Slim is a much more attractive machine than you might initially expect. It is sleek and discreet, losing the shimmering light bar that dissected the original machine and replacing it with a simple LED indicator next to its redesigned switches to let you know when the console is turned on or in rest mode. Just like the Xbox One S, proper buttons are back in vogue, with the touch-sensitive power switch and eject button of the original replaced by physical inputs on the machine's front. This has the extra benefit of avoiding the design flaw of the original, which could cause one of the rubber feet on the base to press up against the eject button. Incidentally, while I would start to worry about myself getting excited about rubber feet on an electronics product, the new PS4's feet are in the shape of PlayStation circle, cross, square and triangle, which I thought was lovely. Sony unveiled the PS4 Slim alongside a scaled-up PS4 Pro and PSVR headset, which will go on sale at a later date. Credit Reuters. The result is a sensible-looking bit of kit that will sit smartly underneath your telly like a well-behaved and well-presented child, taking up less room and, more significantly, not making much noise. While Sony has said the noise output is similar to the original machine, anyone that owns an original PS4 probably thinks their machine sounds like a jumbo jet taking off by now. The new Slim, by comparison, is much quieter, while its energy usage is reportedly 28% lower. Smarter, quieter, more energy efficient? What a good PS4 you are. But a more questionable decision is the removal of the optical audio port, used to connect dedicated sound equipment. This could be an issue for some players, depending on their audio setup, though presumably Sony made the decision with the Slim's less technically minded target audience in mind. Whatever the reason, it still seems an odd omission. Better is the easier access to the hard drive. The new PS4 comes with a 500GB hard drive as standard, which, given the size of game downloads these days, isn't really enough. However, it is another decision taken to keep that price appealing, with the option to upgrade if you want. With the original PS4 you had to dismantle half of the machine, whereas the Slim has a simple port located at the rear that is much easier to unscrew. However, the cost of buying a new hard drive to pop in your machine does mean your total price will start nudging towards the PS4 Pro's £349 price tag, which comes with a 1TB hard drive as standard. The PS4 Slim uses 28% less energy than its predecessor. Credit Sony. Firmware. While the new PS4 doesn't have any technological advancement over its older sibling, Sony has timed a significant firmware update to give all existing PS4s a new lick of paint. The new dashboard is cleaner and more convenient, allowing you to make folders to organize your games. It also features a less intrusive pop-up home menu. In an intriguing move, the new update means that all PS4s will support HDR gaming on compatible 4K TV sets. While the new PS4 doesn't have any 4K support of any description, unlike the upcoming Pro and Xbox One S fancy UHD Blu-ray player, this will make compatible games look significantly better without having to upgrade to the Pro. Everything that comes in the PS4 Slim's box. Credit Sony. Controller. The DualShock 4 controller has also had a little tweak, most notably in the front-facing, multicolored light bar that appears on the touchpad. The light bar on the rear of the controller has had a few neat uses, showing what color you are in multiplayer, registering health levels in action games, made somewhat redundant by the fact you couldn't see it unless you flip the controller over. A thin strip on the new controller solves that problem. And the new controller is also USB compatible, meaning you can plug it straight into a PC if you fancy. The PS4 Pro will be released later in the year. Credit Bloomberg. So should I buy one? As ever, that depends, but there are more factors than usual at play here. If you are an existing PS4 owner, there isn't a particularly compelling case to upgrade unless you are looking for a second machine around the house. And with the PS4 Pro around the corner at the appealing price of £349, anyone that owns, or plans to own, a 4K TV might do well to wait and splash the extra money on the more powerful console. It is less than 2 months away, after all. However, the new PS4 is a lovely, if largely cosmetic, improvement on the original at a great price. So if you are a more casual gamer yet to buy into this generation and fancy dipping into the terrific library of games PlayStation has curated, the Slim is a splendid entry point. Following the release of This Is the Police, developer Vapid penned an open letter to its players, stating that the game isn't political, but human. Having played and digested the game for a good 30+ hours, I understand what they meant regarding the content of the game. But I disagree. I think that to say this game isn't political is doing it a disservice. It is overlooking incredible narrative depth, and an approach to morality and choice that leaves most games' binary good/evil choices looking like the scribblings of a school child. This Is the Police is a deceptively simple game on the surface. A simple, clean art style, comic book cutscenes and block color user interface, a low-detail city map, functional and stylish, sure, but simple. And mechanically, too, it's less complex than many of its peers. At heart, it's a time management clicker. You, the police chief, manage a team of cops of your choosing, send them out on calls, hire and fire, bribe and cajole. You micromanage your team, and your own career, even choosing whether to crawl into the mafia's pocket, secretly work against them, or ignore them entirely. So, yes, it's simple, but it's also really not. It is a game of morality and choice which you can't really lose. Early on, you're presented with a demand from City Hall to fire all the black cops to avoid racial tension. It's pitched as a mission you're supposed to complete. If you don't, you lose some support from City Hall, which in this stage of the game will mean they won't grant your request for more officers, detectives, money. It'd be easy to play through the game fulfilling every request, bowing down before the mayor, agreeing to every kind of unseemly demand thrown your way.
Pete?
Because the whole point is that compromising your morals in that situation is going to win you favor with the corrupt authority. Paid content. John Ritter kept this hidden throughout the filming of Three's Company. Your daily dish. Design lovers, this is your new favorite interior. Cherish. Recommended by. So instead, the game allows you to choose to say no. You can defy City Hall. You can role-play as whatever kind of police chief you want to be. You can, as I found myself doing, develop your own moral code and stick by it. I found it fascinating, after 10 or so hours of play, to notice the systems I had developed, the personalities I had described to my officers, the code of conduct the game had allowed me to form. Things like making sure to send diverse teams of officers to certain types of crime, analyzing the language of crime reports to detect which calls stemmed from genuine danger and which were overreactions from xenophobic or bigoted citizens. Things like making the decision that, failing certain missions was, in fact, a personal victory for the police chief Jack Boyd I was playing as. And no, the game does not point to your decisions and, in blaring lights and fanfare, exclaim, "You have done a good thing." Nor does Jack Boyd glow with a dark red energy and sprout horns the more evil acts you commit. It's up to the player to decide which acts are good, which are bad. Sure, if we are unwilling or unable to allow interactive narratives to cause us to self-analyze, This Is the Police is a failure. It's a game that puts a lot of faith in the player to make intelligent, thoughtful decisions and ascribe meaning to them outside of the usual Paragon/Renegade meters and visual cues. It's a game absolutely dripping in shades of gray. In this sense, I understand exactly what the developers meant by saying it's not political, it's human. But it is political, too. I don't understand how it would be possible to play this as the police, commit some of the more unseemly actions, and then come away feeling as if the narrative hasn't judged you for it. For example, using force to quell protests, often gatherings of marginalized people. Yes, you complete the mission for City Hall if you do that. You're also greeted with often graphic, often uncomfortable descriptions of violence that you have enabled. Does the game really need to also add a message saying, "This is a bad thing," as if we are not capable of gauging this? Playing through this game gave me more pause for thought about morality, violence, xenophobia, bigotry, and the effects of systemic establishment-based oppression than just about any other video game I could care to name. And that absolutely is a political thing as well as a human one. So, sorry VP, but I think you're doing yourselves and your game a disservice here. Because it is political, you have just had the faith in players to allow us to vocalize our own conclusions regarding the political and sociological events we play a part in. Embrace that. You've done great. All this isn't to say that This Is the Police is entirely perfect though. Narratively, the personal story of John Boyd is a little at odds with the emergent nature of the main game. And hearing him pine over his estranged wife got a little tiring after a while, although, in my playthrough at least, I was pleasantly surprised with the outcome, far from the traditional, man fights to win back the girl. Gets what he wants. Some of the voice acting is a little amateurish also, taking away from the otherwise excellent tone set by the moody, somber events and the excellently 80 seconds jazz and classical soundtrack. And it is long. It's really long, and it takes a fair while to properly show its hand. It'd be easy to mistake the game as a slightly shallow, meaningless interactive adventure if you didn't play at least until the first time jump. It doesn't really begin to show its emotional and narrative depth even slightly until the 5-hour mark, which is a big risk on the developer's part. But play to the end and it's an incredibly rewarding, intelligent narrative experience that allows the player to shape a story that is far more than what's on the screen. I finished it nearly a month ago and I haven't been able to stop thinking about it since then, about the choices I made and the things that were asked of me. That's far more powerful than any morality meter or change in character appearance. This Is the Police won't be for everyone. If you like your video game narratives blunt and to the point, with your moral choices presented in black and white with clear rewards or punishments immediately following, then it could easily seem shallow. But there's a huge amount of depth beneath the surface of this game, hidden in every description of events, behind every request or demand made of you, framing every decision that you choose to make. It's niche, time-consuming and subtle, but it's also incredibly rewarding, thoughtful and deep. By Olivia White. "10 years later, replaying the original BioShock is a risky prospect. Revisiting a game as special as this, a smart story, driven shooter set in the dark, underwater dystopian city of Rapture a game which helped to define the generation of games that came after it always has the potential to disappoint. Thankfully, it doesn't. And this collection also includes 2010's BioShock 2 and 2013's BioShock Infinite. The former was always an underrated gem not developed by Irrational Games, the series creator and brainchild, and it lacked that initial wonder of seeing the city of Rapture for the first time. BioShock Infinite was a smart but divisive blockbuster, Returning to Irrational Games' capable hands, Infinite is a much better shooter, but it was never quite made the statement of the original. Unsurprisingly, BioShock receives the most technical work. Rapture here is basically as good as you remember it. Creaking, leaking and sumptuously atmospheric, it still makes a fabulously stark impact from get-go, and its characters the enigmatic Andrew, the elusive Atlas, the mad murderous Steinman and the insane also homicidal artist, Sander Cohen, are all brilliant to this day. BioShock's underwater city of Rapture is as atmospheric as ever. So, too, are Rapture's key ideas. Finding your first plasmid the genetic augmentations that, using the substance atom extracted from a rare sea slug, allowed Rapture's populace to transcend the barriers of humanity is still a truly empowering moment. The annual football game Clash has been fired up again in recent years, with Konami's Pro Evolution Soccer's huge improvement on the pitch finally giving FIFA a sturdy challenge. While FIFA is unlikely to be overhauled in the sales stakes, PES reclaimed its place as the critical darling last year, with many proclaiming it to be the best football game ever made. Konami are looking to keep that momentum going with PES 2017. The changes on the pitch aren't as startling this time around, but instead are a refinement of what was already a superb game of football. It is all a bit heavier and measured, in a good way, with more considered build-up and physical play. But it retains the whip-quick arcade feel that gives the game such pep. Arcade can be a dirty word around sports simulations, but Konami know exactly when to tone down the realism in order to maintain the game's pace. The deliberately dropped frame of a turning animation here, the exaggerated fizz and curl of certain shots there. It is, in other words, happy to be a video game every now and then. Goalkeepers are much improved in this year's game. That's not to say the game lacks for realism, as in many ways this is the most authentic realization of the sport ever made. PES 2017 places a great deal of emphasis on tactics and player individuality. Understanding the particular strength of your team and its play style is more important than in any other football game, the slick passing game of Barcelona, the high pressing of Klopp's Liverpool, or the more direct, physical game of a less technically gifted side. Each is a perfectly valid approach in PES, leading to brilliantly unpredictable clashes. Each tactical approach is laid out for you in your game plan screen, but actually pulling it off is down to you, taking advantage of players' movement and making sure the right players are performing the right jobs. Start lumping balls forward when setting up a tiki-taka plan and you'll find your strikers too deep and vice versa if you are going route 1. PES also makes each player feel individual to the point that your game plan may need to change on the basis of one substitution. Take Arsenal. With Olivier Giroud up front, you might be more willing to play wide and start whipping crosses for him to get his perfectly coiffed bonds on. Swap him for Danny Welbeck and you'll need to play shorter, looking for a chance to nip the ball through to take advantage of his extra yard of pace. Yet it is as integral to be able to switch your entire approach mid-game if your opponents are snuffing out plan or things are getting desperate. The AI certainly will. Even Barca, finding themselves 2-1 down to my Arsenal team, abandoned their short passing game and reverted to top-loading the pitch to fire direct balls towards the forwards. In opposition, the AI is a fiery and wonderfully unpredictable beast, closing you down quickly, not afraid of crunching tackles and more than willing to take risks and long-range belters in attack. More human, in other words. Teammate AI is similarly excellent. The other players in your team are constantly on the move, fullbacks marauding forwards, midfielders jostling to show for a pass, strikers pushing and pulling the defensive line. They buzz around the pitch with real intelligence, always looking to give you options. A forward might quickly veer towards the near post and lose his marker when you are by the touchline, allowing you to whip in a low cross. And I am delighted to see a midfielder like Kevin De Bruyne dropping to the 18-yard line when I'm down the wing. If all my strikers are tightly marshaled, it gives me another option, knocking the ball back for a thumping long-range effort. Which brings us to the goalkeepers, who are massively improved this year. Not just in terms of being better, though generally they are, but in animation and behavior. They will fling themselves acrobatically for spectacular saves, making the already satisfying shooting that little bit more crunchy, but it's how they deal with the small things that impresses. They will purposefully push shots wide to avoid rebounds, carefully catch and hold on to softer efforts, and are quick to react should the ball be about to come flying back their way after a save. They're still fallible, of course, but any mistake so far has felt like a natural occurrence rather than a clumsy piece of coding. All of these things, small and obvious as they may seem on their own, make for a wonderfully dynamic and charismatic game of football. Matches take on lives of their own, and rarely are any two games the same. From 0 to 0 grinds to 4 to 3 thrillers, PES 2017 is always a pleasure to play. Referees are more strict and happier to dish out cards, though you can still get in plenty of robust challenges. So the on-pitch action continues its splendid upwards trajectory. Yet familiar complaints off the pitch remain. The continued lack of licensing is an unavoidable issue, of course, with many clubs, including the majority of the Premier League and La Liga, set up with fake names and kits. However, Konami has made it that much easier, on PS4 at least, to import the fan-made option files that should keep you up to date. And Konami has already avoided a pitfall of last year's game by keeping squads updated. Other issues are less excusable. Peter Drury and Jim Beglin's commentary is abysmal, with the pair waffling cliches at each other that rarely pertain to the match at hand. There is some effort at conversation, but it is stilted and quick to repeat. And while the game is handsome for the most part, the odd robotic animation and clunky menus means it lacks the presentational flair of its main rival. These things are to be expected, perhaps, but there is only so much a smaller budget can excuse. The single-player Master League remains as compelling as ever, with a few welcome tweaks that focus on player personality. And I particularly like how playing young players can boost their form in order to encourage you to keep them in the team. The Ultimate Team Mapping Club, meanwhile, has also seen some tidying but is still a little clumsy when compared to FIFA's slick metagames. The on-pitch action is peerless, but problems off the field remain. Perhaps most frustrating, however, is online. Matchmaking in the ranked divisions takes too long and can often lead to laggy matches. A lack of filtering when playing also brings problems. While in unranked friendly matches you can filter a class of teams such as Man City, Dortmund, Arsenal, etc. Teams more mid-table Premier League sides and their equivalents, there is no such option in the mode you will likely be spending most of your time online. The chance to earn more points the lower ranked your team is a nice touch, but that tends not to stop people only choosing the best teams. One of the nice things about FIFA's matchmaking has always been the good variety of teams you get to play against depending on your own selection. Here it is a constant procession of Barcelona and Real Madrid players thumping balls up to mercurial front threes, which, frankly, gets a little tiresome. Particularly when one of PES's greatest strength is the individuality of its teams, tactics and players. These things can be explored in abundance offline and with friends, where the game is at its raucous best. While there are off-field problems that go beyond unavoidable licensing issues, on the pitch, PES remains peerless. Since the excellent Madden NFL 15 corrected a wobble in its famous gridiron sim, the series has maintained a course of excellence. As ever when an annual sports game hits upon the winning formula, the trick becomes iteration and improvement. In some ways, clearing a fumble and starting again is easier than building on foundations you already have. So it is always a pleasure to see those improvements manifest, particularly when the game in question has no serious competition to speak of. Those are the hard yards. So it is with Madden NFL 17, a definable gain on the play and a more significant jump than its predecessor, enabled by smart tweaks of detail on and off the field. Some of which you could argue are overdue. The Los Angeles Rams' Todd Gurley benefits from Madden NFL 17's bolstered running game. Despite the NFL's increasing focus on passing, here we have a beefier running game, with improved gap assignments for the offensive line, better player locomotion and a context-sensitive button system that gives you more options on jukes, breaks and spins. There's even a button that allows your player to suck themselves in to squeeze through tight gaps in the defense. Ultimately it's a system that gives you more options on the ground, which adds to Madden 15's bolstering of defense and the controllable catching that so improved the passing game last year. Previously Madden could feel like a game that passed by the untrained eye, plays unfolding without you feeling like you are having any due influence. While the complexities of American football still demand investigation, more of that later, as consistent chipping away at particular parts of the play each year has made for a more engaging game for both newbies and the experienced. Fresh converts can figure out what their input means, while old hands are given a greater degree of flexibility. Win-win. Nowhere is this more apparent than on defense. While the overhaul for playing D came in 15, here it is refined to the point that it is considerably more fun. Improved teammate AI means that whatever player you have selected before the snap, tackle, linebacker or safety, you can count on the other players to do their job so you can do yours. Kicking has also been tweaked with a 3-touch meter. Special teams on D, meanwhile, can now block field goals. Or so we're told. Often playing defense on Madden could be a chore, with you happy to leave it to the AI and hope for the best. Here you feel more in control, whether you are covering receivers in the secondary or, my favorite, thundering through an offensive tackle in search of a sack. A boost in physicality and animation means you can get the feel of a play quicker, figuring whether to go for brute force or switch players to take a different approach. What all of the gameplay tweaks lead to is a game with a lot more personality and individuality. A criticism that could be leveled at Madden, and even other EA Sports games like FIFA and NHL, is that for all of its qualities, teams and players could feel interchangeable. Not here, with teams focusing on strengths that have a tangible impact on plays. So you can feel the heft of Dolphins tackle Damakongsa as he tramples through the offensive line. Teams blessed with blue-chip quarterbacks like Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers will be a lot more refined on passing plays. The Seahawks and Vikings will exploit the strength of their ground game. It all seems crushingly obvious, but that individuality is something that Madden has lacked, so now more than ever, you must take the strengths and weaknesses of your team and your opponents into account when picking your plays. And one thing Madden has done very well in recent years is acknowledging that American football is a splendidly complicated sport. Even some dedicated gridiron fans get by with a base understanding of plays, and it's a pain. The skills trainer is a tremendous tool, running tactics, simple explanations of player positions and so you can't brush up on your tight end, to break blitzes, 6 play. If you don't know what any of this gridiron jargon means but want to find out, you could do a lot worse than playing Madden. All of the NFL stadia are faithfully recreated, including the Miami Dolphins' recently renovated Hard Rock Stadium. Off the field, EA Tiburn has also made tweaks to allow both more accessibility and depth. The most notable addition is the option to play moments, a truncated version of the game which simulates much of the bread and butter play before calling you into action at crunch points. A crucial 3RD down on a fence, say, or tasking you with a red zone defense as your opponents come looking for a touchdown. It's a smart option in theory. A full game of Madden can take up to an hour on default settings, which is a notable commitment of time. Here you can buzz through a game in less than 20 minutes while still maintaining a reasonable sense of rhythm. Useful if you fancy a game and are in a rush, though you are at the mercy of a simulation that can be reuningly erratic. One tantrum-inducing game had my Fins team lose 21-20 to the Patriots with every single score for the Pats playing out in the sim. A worthwhile addition, for sure, though full-fat games remain the best way to play. Elsewhere, franchise mode has been bolstered with more detailed player training, trading and improvement, and there is the much sought-after addition of a practice squad. Draft Champions and Madden Ultimate Team, meanwhile, scratch that fantasy football and trading card itch respectively. It is a cracking improvement all round, bolstering play and presentation. The new commentary duo of Brandon Gaudin and Charles Davies is a particular revelation, reacting smoothly to plays and context and offering genuine insight to how games are playing out. There remains repetition, of course, but with a constantly updating commentary to take real-world events into account, including Colin Kaepernick's much-publicized national anthem protest, it makes for the most dynamic analysis we have heard in a sports game. The updated commentary is a measure of the effort that has gone into Madden NFL 17 when EA Tiburn could have easily rest on its laurels. A sterling upgrade that has taken the fine work of its predecessors and ran with it. He is an asshole. IT buffoon. A very simple task. Now, I'm constantly checking my phone to see if Henry, the idiot, is acting on its text message service. To say the job is done, even after the galoot signed off last night and finished, cheerily texting, sorry, I'll do it first in the morning. Wacky Henry, I type. Time to go to work. Nothing. For crying out loud, Henry. I start to wonder how it has come to be that I am merely slipping my phone from my pocket every few minutes, hoping for a message from a fictional IT guy who I have tricked into performing a not exactly legal directive. And I'm the one getting mad. The Mr. Robot exfiltration app acts as an E-Core branded OS for your phone, with the story unfolding via text messages. This is a fundamental quandary of Knight's Mr. Robot Exfiltration, an experimental adaptation of Sammy Smell's cult TV. Taking place towards the end of the show's first season, the bot's hacker phone found on opening the app. Filtration acts as an E-Core operating system for your own real you can scroll through contacts, store files, and, crucially, send and receive text messages. It is through the messaging app that exfiltration story unfolds, with members of Vigilante contacting and coercing you into performing tasks for them. All through the messaging system. So while Mr. Rogue TV show places a premium on classic punched over a computer hacking, the game takes on the more sinister facet of faceless social engineering. So you will be messaging security firms and its drones, impersonating employees and being pretty mean to poor guys like Henry. The messages are pre-written with a between 2 or 3 options each time. Generally, you can take a soft approach, or continue to be indignant that you were forced to follow society's whim. More likely you will find yourself falling into character, enjoying it a little too much while saving a healthy dose of paranoia over the actions and identity of the person on the other side of the exfil. Exfiltration is a successful experiment for a few reasons. It is a game that highlights the inherent dangers of anonymous communication, with you all too willing to do as you are told, despite society's varying call of social rebellion, and the people you influence yourself too often the same. While the pace of the story necessarily makes some of your marks a little too easy to convince, the script's light a disturbingly believable theater of misplaced trust. Despite our society's ever-increasing paranoia, there's the feeling that most humans want to, or are inclined to, believe that the person on the other side of a conversation is telling the truth, whether it's through naivete or otherwise. Here you feel like you are put on both sides of the divide, manipulated by society to manipulate others. That you might start to enjoy and crave the power that the latter affords is a disturbing and fascinating thing. I'm the coolest dude in Golem City. On the outskirts of Prague, this ramshackle cyberpunk favela is more prison camp than home, all stacked up shanties stretching out of view like makeshift birds, while electrical wires trail and tangle overhead, powering the many TV sets beaming news to its downtrodden citizens. I'm strolling through as the impeccably bearded Adam Jensen, a man with retractable robot Ray-Bans, concealed wrist blades, arms probably designed by Bang & Olufsen, and a custom-made jacket that would make the cast of The Matrix blush. Everyone else in Golem is just like Jensen, augmented, though not as stylish. In Mankind Divided's world, mechanical body parts can be bought and worn like fashion accessories. Lopping off limbs is now considered normal as humanity transcends beyond the limitations of flesh. The tech was once reserved for higher classes - those who could afford both the mechanical limbs and the anti-rejection drugs needed to survive the procedures - but ever since cybernetic humans lost control in a violent rage 2 years ago, the augmented have been outcasts. Jensen is here on a mission to capture the leader of the Augmented Rights Coalition, a cybernetic terror group who are suspects in a recent train station bombing in the capital. The thing is, Jensen has a problem. He can't walk by a locked door without breaking in, rooting through everyone's private emails, powering down security systems, chilling out with their ebooks, stealing their belongings, and launching their designer fridge across the room hiding a well-dressed menace. That's why he's currently crouched over an unconscious police officer. Jensen doesn't need to break into the police lockup and clear it out, but he sure as hell wants to. The custom-made jacket houses so many pockets, it would be a waste to not fill them up with stolen Lamborghini and illicit hacking tools. Aim in Deus Ex, Human Revolution. Jensen was working in Seraphin when the call came in - a hostage situation. Of course, being plunked into this hub full of offices to break into, emails to snoop on and supply cupboards to raid, Jensen couldn't help himself. Human Revolution murdered the hostages because of Jensen's tardiness. Jensen still hasn't learned, though. Mankind Divided's first and only hub area is Prague itself. From the Valley Theater just by the red light district to the high-security Palisade Bank, these streets are crammed with explorable buildings, some of which are like miniature levels in themselves. Prague is the most complex hub in any Deus Ex game. There are shops, storage lockups, warehouses, bars, clubs, apartments and more to scurry around in, all spread out across its cobbled city streets. You can easily spend over an hour just exploring Jensen's apartment complex, climbing onto the balcony and breaking in through your neighbor's windows, hacking through their front doors and fondling their fridges. While it's initially slightly disappointing that there's a single hub, this twisting collection of city blocks needs its own metro station for fast travel because it's so vast. It also changes as you play, with the mood on the streets matching the story as it unfolds, as tensions rise between the augmented and naturals. Despite Jensen now being an Interpol agent, it's not quite the jet-setting adventure Human Revolution was. Outside of Prague you only visit 4 other locations, including Golem City. But it does make up for it with complex level design. The satisfyingly broad number of options available to you are dictated by your augmented abilities. Locked doors can be bypassed by more means than just hacking. Maybe you can use your leg enhancements to reach a high height. Or you could use your strength upgrade to pick up a vending machine and climb up that. If not, then you can always use explosives and blow the door and a stealthy approach to high heaven. Even bypassing a security camera can be made interesting. Game systems, slip underneath it, turn invisible and stroll by, disable it remotely, or hack the security console and pass. If all else fails, launch a fridge at it. Deus Ex is at its best when presenting you with problems and forcing you to improvise. One section sees Jensen on a VIP balcony overlooking a theater stage. Down below, local crime family are pretending, and there are civilians in the mix, and my Jensen only kills those who deserve it. That's without backtracking and find another route. So, pressed against the wall, I pulled my one gas grenade and tossed into the crowd. As most begin to choke and keel over, I jumped over the balcony and descend my Icarus landing system great fall. My respirator upgrade automatically outside the cloud of gas. A quick blast sends the paragolling across the stage, unconscious. The blazes, to kill, to incapacitate, to talk, fight or sneak your way through divided. Its story, however, isn't. The game holds up a mirror to our own world and today's tensions, swapping out real minorities for the augmented, but, rather than challenge these problems, it sits so firmly on the fence that you would think its backside was augmented. Biggest offense, though, is how it just feels unfinished. It's a lengthy game. Steam tells me I played for 30 hours, but it ends just as it's hitting its stride. A message saying, "New Game Plus Unlocked," pops up mid-conversation and leaves your jaw hanging, just like most of the game's plot threads. This leaves a bitter taste, especially when it's made clear that those plot threads are being saved for a sequel. More Deus Ex is fine by me, but there's just so much here that never pays off. You're essentially a double agent, and at one point you were tasked with spying on your bosses. It's tense and exciting, and you wonder how it will play out. This whole plot is soon kicked into the long grass, leaving many questions unanswered. All of the game's intrigue suddenly flops to the floor like the party of revelers huffing on a gas grenade. I'm still keen to go through again and see how it plays out if I make different choices. Both in conversations and in the field maybe this time Jensen will leave the fridges alone but mankind divided's lofty goals are hampered by a weak story and an unwillingness to commit to the themes it portrays. Like Adam Jensen, this story feels like it's had its limbs amputated and new parts grafted on, while the old parts were taken away and put into cold storage for the next game. The disappointment aside, I do hope we get another sequel, as there just aren't enough games like this being made. Games that use systems to allow players to create their own stories. Video game narratives can be great, but nothing will surpass the stories we create in collaboration with the game. Emergent, unscripted moments that pop up unplanned and create lasting impressions, and that's where Mankind Divided excels. Paid content. The 20 turns of Azerbaijan's Baku city circuit, which celebrated its inaugural race this June, are some of the most exciting in recent years. Like so many tracks designed by the sport's go-to architect, Herman Tilke, Baku is blisteringly quick the fastest of its kind in the world comprised of several mile-long straights, hard 90-degree handers both left and right, exhilaratingly shallow high-speed sweeps, and a tight maze-like zigzag through a perilously narrow uphill chicane. Much like the iconic Monacan Gauntlet the circuit that has, somehow, despite the ever-increasing safety measures of the sport, remained a championship centerpiece since 1929. The margin for error in Baku is dangerously slight, an endless regiment of solid steel lines the entire course, beckoning for you to smash straight into them. Baku, the largest of many new exciting additions in F1 2016, a game in many ways reflects the intense hard work and determination needed to win something like the Azerbaijani Grand Prix. It's an incredible turnaround from the slim pickings of last year's game, which didn't even feature a career mode. F1 2016 is a racer that doesn't revolutionize what has always been an authentic representation of the sport, but which adds so many new features that it's difficult to believe what Codemaster has done with the series in 12 short months. It's a game that finally looks like it's inspired by one of the sport world, too. So much so that the PS4 often struggles to keep a stable 60 FPS. The towering neon of the ES Viceroy Hotel in Abu Dhabi. The towering lights of Singer's incredible night race, the sunset over Bahrain's dusky desert. F1 2016 brings its circuits to life in a way no iteration has done previously, from the detail on the tarmac, the varying weather effects, where the rain is the best and most ominous it's ever been. You're even able to select the time of day for certain events, allowing you to see circuits like you've never seen them before. Fancy an evening time trial session around the sun-soaked Hangar ring. You can go do that. It's a game that feels fuller than ever, thanks in part to the return of that career mode. Here, the game lets you choose your own personal avatar face, helmet and all and the kind of career you want to participate in. You can choose whichever team you want to start in, as well as select which driver you'd like as your teammate. Start an established top-tier team like Mercedes and you'll race a 2-season career with set objectives. Start in a manner and you have a career of 7+ seasons with which to rise from the of the grid to a world championship win. With each weekend, F1 2016 reveals more and more of its depth. For the most hardcore fans, you can indulge in all 3 full-length practice sessions, a full qualifying and the entire race itself. There are also 25% and 50% intervals, easily sucking up hours of your time with each calendar event. This is no doubt where F1 2016 shines, where simulation underpinnings